Christmas market incidents a few years ago. And so, this happens all too often. I'm just curious about who the potential suspect is or who the suspect is. And so I guess until we learn that, it's going to be hard to draw any conclusions here.
You say this happens all too often, and I was looking back at recent German history to validate that statement, and you have Munich 2025, an Afghan asylum seeker, 2 killed, 43 wounded. 2024, 3 people killed, several more injured following a knife attack in Solingen. That was a Syrian national. 2020, 1 person killed, another seriously injured in a knife attack in Dresden, another Syrian national. And of course, the most well-known, sadly, 2016, the Christmas market attack in Berlin. 12 dead, 56 injured. So whilst, again, we do not know at this stage, we haven't got a suspect in custody, they are still, as we understand it, on the run. There is a manhunt underway. Hillary, this is not the first time where we have seen an event such as this one in the recent history of Germany.
No, absolutely correct, Will. And I think it's rather sad, actually, because when Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance were in Europe, they were lambasted for pointing to the decline of Western culture and the elimination of Western culture as we know it, Western civilization. But you pointed to, going back all those years to 2016 in Munich at that Christmas market, these are festivities and celebrations that have taken place for hundreds of years by people native to our countries, and now they're being cancelled in advance because of the previous attacks. And look at recently, you mentioned a litany there, Will, you're absolutely correct, of all the events that have happened, and so did Greg. In addition, what about just recently when fireworks were set off at the Eiffel Tower? So we have to be aware that if we don't do something soon, we will be obliterated because people won't want to won't want to hold traditional events or celebrations for fear of these sort of attacks, Will, and that is what is scary going forward.
So I think the word attack is a legitimate one, and that the police have confirmed that this was a deliberate act. This wasn't an act of gross negligence, for example. We know that much. Again, we don't know at this stage who committed this or what the reasons were behind it, but it certainly would fit a pattern if it was Islamist terrorism, given that this attack was directed at a Pride event and a car was used in much the same way that it has been used in attacks in the past. Greg, Douglas Murray, a decade or so ago, maybe 15 years ago now, wrote of the strange death of Europe, and it's a bracing term, and it's a term that has proven to be prophetic as the years have gone by up until today.
Yeah, absolutely. And Douglas Murray, called it out, as you pointed out, 10 years ago. And he's been talking about it recently as well. And he's been getting some heat from it, of course, from the progressive left. But he's, and by the way, Douglas Murray's not a fan of these kind of events, personally, but that's not an excuse, obviously. And so look, this is just another tragic event. We've gone through a couple of examples, but I think it was in Nice back in, maybe 8 or so years ago. Same kind of attack with a truck, in a beautiful summer day. And so, this is something that Douglas Murray and others have pointed out that this is not a coincidence. This is a deliberate pattern. And yes, the perpetrators are typically, recent migrants and are kind of trying to bring jihad to Europe.
Well, there are things that we know, there are things that we don't know, and we're going to go to Berlin now to journalist Pete Carville, who is on the scene. Again, ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing live footage of the aftermath of this attack, and that is emergency service workers at the scene. Pete, do we have you there?
Hello. Hey, it's good. It's Pete Carville calling from Berlin.
Hi, Pete. Thank you for joining us on GBNews. What do you know and what do you don't? What do you know and what don't you know at this stage around this attack, and what's the latest?
Okay, so what we know so far at this stage is that a car or a truck was driven into the crowd just by the Brandenburg Gate. Reportedly, 1 person's been killed, 15 more have been injured. But after that, the police are not confirming anything. The attack happened probably about an hour and a half ago, and immediately they closed down the centre of the city. So where there would have been 50 or 60,000 people here earlier tonight, I maybe saw 40 as I was walking around for 25 minutes. What I can tell you, though, is that the area where the attack happened has for years been known as one of the most vulnerable to a terrorist attack. A friend of mine worked for one of the big embassies here, said there was a list of embassies that were most vulnerable, and that embassy was here because of the two big roads, the Strasse, the 17th of June behind me, and the Ebertstrasse, which is where the vehicle reportedly was driven down.
Pete, in the United Kingdom, the police have come under criticism for not being transparent with the public, basically saying words to the effect of don't speculate in incidents like this, comparable incidents like this. What is the attitude of the police in Germany when these sorts of things happen, and what type of communication can we expect in the hours and days ahead?
Well, quite rightfully, they're not going to speculate on what the motivations were for this. We saw speculation in Liverpool a couple of years ago, my hometown, where someone drove a car into a crowd there, and that was not an Islamic attack. However, they probably will be looking at some kind of religious motivation. It could also be a far-right motivation. The far-right's been rising here for quite a while, and they tend not to have the best, most progressive attitude towards the gay and lesbian community. So right now, the police are going to be very, very, very careful and circumspect, so they're not confirming. And they wouldn't even tell me where the car had come from when I walked through tonight. But I suspect in the next couple of days we'll probably have more of an idea of who's perpetrated this crime once the manhunt has hopefully been completed and being completed soon.
Pete, can you just give me a feel for the event in the lead up to this attack? What was the scale of it? What was the atmosphere like? Just help paint a picture for GB News viewers and listeners.
Sure. So the Christmas Day Parade here in Berlin is one of the premier gay and lesbian events around Europe. There would have been 50 to 60,000 people here, all celebrating, partying, hoping that they were safe in one of the most progressive cities in the world. And it just would have been a party. It would have been a celebration. Now, obviously, the Berlin police and the Berlin city would have had measures in place. They know that it would have been vulnerable to a terrorist attack, but most people wouldn't have been thinking about that. They would have just been here to have a good time, to hang out with people that they love and that they liked, and really to celebrate just the achievement of being able to be, out and gay and proud in a city such as Berlin.
Well, it's a tragic event. Sadly, it's a tragic event that has happened once again. Pete, we may come back to you if there an evolution throughout the evening. But thank you very much for your time. So you are still seeing now live footage of the aftermath of this deadly attack. Again, you're watching at the moment emergency services who are at the scene. Matthew, I'll go to you. Your reflections.
My reflections are another appalling event. These are terrible things when they happen. I hope that the perpetrator is caught very, very swiftly and that he or she is brought to justice. And my thoughts, obviously, as I'm sure all GB News viewers' thoughts will be with the victims. One person dead, many injured, as we've been hearing and seeing tonight. So a terrible event. Just to respond to one or two of the things that have been said, we seem to have spilled over into Douglas Murray's book from a decade ago, The Strange Death of Europe. And one of the contributors in America was saying, if we don't act fast, we're going to be obliterated. But I can confirm that we aren't going to be obliterated. Europe is not dying, and there are plenty of problems facing our country, but one of them is not obliteration, other than potentially by nuclear weapons. So I think we can calm down on that. We've lived with all sorts of terrorism for some time. As we don't know whether this is Islamo-fascist terrorism, whether this is far-right terrorism, and I think we should wait before speculating.
Benedict?
I think it's just deeply depressing to see once again an incident of a gathering of people being targeted with a vehicle, and I think that this has become the modus operandi of multiple different people with various different ideologies, but particularly obviously Islamists, but also other people as well. This has been used by, and I think what's so deeply depressing about it is that it is so simple and it's very difficult to guard against. Ultimately, by the very nature, something that's travelling at speed, something that is incredibly heavy, is very difficult to stop. And actually we've gone from being in a position where the major threat we all thought was something far more significant, maybe sort of a bomb or something like that. It's now the ordinary everyday car or van, and that can be used by absolutely anybody with a gripe. And I think that is thoroughly depressing that, mimetically almost, this has spread and is now being used almost regularly in attacks against members of the public for all sorts of reasons.
And the sad thing isn't just the senseless injuries and loss of life. It is then how you're societies change as a result. So in London, it is very hard to go to a public space now and not see bollards everywhere. And they just continue to be a reminder of a fractured society.
Yeah, well, we had this, of course, in the aftermath of particularly the 9/11 terror attacks, but other instances at airports as well, where suddenly the response was that all of our airport experiences became infinitely less pleasant and more difficult. And we all understood why that was. There were legitimate threats against people as a result of that. But, you know, it is one of those things where you sort of think, everybody says you can't let terrorism get the better of you, you can't let them win, you can't negotiate with terrorists, but ever so creepingly, ever so slowly, they do manage to force changes in our way of life. And if that is, as you say, well, you know, the installation at great cost, it must be said to the taxpayer, of bollards in just about every public space where there may be people just sort of going about their day-to-day lives, or if it is simply people cancelling events or not turning up to things in the first place that otherwise they would have done so. That is a form of victory.
I would say, I think we're all three Londoners, aren't we? But we've got experience from other parts of the country. Certainly speaking for London, I think that our lives have been very, very lightly touched by preemptive, preventive actions taken by authorities against horrific events like this. Yes, of course, you need sensible precautions in place and you can't ignore threats. Equally, you can't live your life in fear. I remember after those horrific terror attacks in July of 2005, you know, over 20 years ago, 7/7. I remember wondering about getting on a tube train several times, wondering which carriage I was going to get on, but by goodness, I got on that tube train. And you just have to get on with your life, because otherwise the terrorists win. I was saying earlier, we have lived with a terrorist threat, various terrorist threats during my lifetime in London and in Britain as a whole, and we get on with things and we don't bend to terror.
Well said. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, keeping in mind that we will keep you abreast of recent developments in Berlin as we become aware of them. We will bring you updates on the show there, and also we will bring you...
Don't pay any attention whatsoever to what Donald Trump says.
Closer to home, West Streeting will make a fresh charm offensive towards Donald Trump, but with previous comments such as those, will it work? This is The Late Show Live, only on GBNews.
Join me, Nana Okwir, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From cold mornings
to warm family brunches,
from football to tennis, in the car,
in the kitchen,
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again
to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories.
And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live on GB News. Well, in other breaking news this morning, Britain's new Defence Secretary Wes Streeting has pledged to rebuild Britain's fractured military partnership with the US by unleashing a charm offensive on the Trump administration. Streeting wants to reset the special relationship, which has come under strain since the start of the Iran war. He's told his American counterpart Pete Hegseth that he wants to work together to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He also promised that Britain would spend more on defence and bring its armed forces up to date, allowing them to meet the demands of modern warfare. Well, with me now to discuss is political strategist Thomas Corbett-Dillon. Thomas, thanks for joining me this morning. Great to see you. What do you make of Wes Streeting's comments?
Well, he's got a big job to do. Particularly, first of all, the appointment of Ed Miliband has not gone down too well in this town. So they're already coming in a bad environment. Because remember, Ed Miliband's brother, David, he's based out here and he runs the largest refugee charity in the world. So his job literally is to bring illegal refugees into the US, into Europe. So already he's not very popular with the Trumps. So then you put Miliband in, Ed Miliband, who obviously loves these windmills and things that the president absolutely hates. This new, Burnham administration, I should call it, is coming into a tough situation in DC. So I don't know how Wes is going to put it off, but at least he's trying.
Well, I just in that intro there, I framed the special relationship as being under strain. Is that a fair characterisation at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, most people say the special relationship really doesn't exist. It's only really held together because the president's mother is from Scotland. If you look to the future, if we have a President Rubio or JD Vance or even Gavin Newsom, they're not going to have a tie to England. They're not going to have the same, affinity for the UK that the president does. So we really have to use this opportunity to cement the special relationship in history. But it really is in a dark situation today. And I think one of the problems they've got is that every single one of them have gone on record saying horrible things about the president, like completely irrelevant things about the president. So, I think those words might come back and bite them.
Do you, though? Because, look, if Trump held past bad comments against everyone who'd said those to him, there wouldn't be much diplomacy at all. Pretty much every member of this Labor government at various points in time has bagged Donald Trump. He seems to be able to move on with people so long as they bend the knee.
Right, and I think, you've nailed it there. I mean, it would be rare for the president to meet someone that hasn't insulted him. It seems to be pretty common no matter where you're from in the world. So he's quite used to it, so I'm sure they'll have a good relationship. But I think the US are certainly going to be looking at the UK because the money that they're spending, they keep announcing all this spending on foreign aid and things like that. And it's like, well, do we have any money to spend on the military? Germany is about to spend 100 billion euros on their military a year, and we're way, way behind. The English people sit at home and sort of think that America has, no safety net and nothing to look after. The US spends more on giving out food stamps to poor people than the UK spends on their defense. So, the fact is the UK is far, far behind where it needs to be. And that's what the US is going to be pushing for.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see. Thomas, thanks very much for your time this morning. Let's go to the panel now. Benedict, I'll start with you. Putting to one side, at least for the moment, the structural problems that the armed forces in this country has and the monumental effort it would be to actually get funding up to the level that the US wants, I want to hone in on Wes Streeting specifically. he appears to be competent. He's one of the more competent ministers in the Labor government. He is more moderate than many of his colleagues. At the same time, he doesn't have any military experience, and I would have thought this is one of those portfolios, unlike sport or culture or a throwaway position, where you do need to understand the subject matter if you're actually going to deliver.
Up to a point, but I think actually one of the issues the MOD has is that you had a lot of people in it who have got military experience, and in terms of value for money, in terms of spending, it's not very good. It's very inefficient, and actually in many ways it's a very good thing that the UK isn't constantly at war, because then people would understand quite how inefficient it is compared to things like, say, the NHS or the education sector. I mean, it would make people, I think, deeply uncomfortable if they discovered quite the level of waste. But yeah, I think really, in terms of sort of cozying up to Donald Trump or anything like that, it's one of those things where you kind of just shrug and go, well, you know, they like to play these sorts of political games, but I don't think that it's really of any value to the UK or the United States. What's of value to both of those people is a strong British military, and that's one that can actually act independently of the United States as well. The UK does not exist simply to be an extension of the US military, which far too often I think people almost sort of consider it as. Britain needs to strengthen its military for its own purposes, for its own reasons, for its own interests. And actually, that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be helping to try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, because we don't necessarily have the capabilities. It's not necessarily the area of the world we wish to specialise in going forward. I think we need to think long and hard about that. Are we actually going to be the country that is deploying to the Middle East regularly? I suspect probably not going forward. So why would that be at the top of our agenda when we have other things that we could probably spend our defence budget on?
Yeah, Hillary, I've just honed in on Wes Streeting, the personality, but at the same time, probably the better prefacing question would have been, do the personalities matter at all, or will the US basically say, look, we really just care that you have your defence spending where we want it to be, allow us to use your bases from time to time, and above and beyond that, we don't really care who is actually formally in that post?
I think you're absolutely right on all of that. I do think if you layered on top, obviously, a personality that gets along well with the counterparts in the US is the icing on the cake. But you're absolutely correct about that. The bases are far more important. And actually, I would add, look at Pete Hegseth. What he has here in the US is the respect also of the military rank and file. That's what concerns me also with Wes Streeting. Are you talking about the fact that military personnel don't care if somebody has any experience or not? So I do think that that matters, but it's not the mission critical issue here with the special relationship. I do think with regard to the special relationship, maybe they're coming to their senses, because one of the points I've always been making is, who does the UK really think is our friend? Do we think that the EU would come to save us and help us? Do we think Russia would? Do we think that China would? No! The only one that ever has and ever will be the US. So I think hopefully they're being really smart, and Wes Streeting is saying, look, we have to have the US on sides, and that's why he's buddying up to Pete Hegseth and trying to make good.
Matthew, your response to that?
Yeah, I would just say I would like to lay to rest this idea that you can't be Defence Secretary if you haven't served in the armed forces. It's just simply not true. I've actually talked to Sir Malcolm Rifkin about this, interviewed him about his life and career. He was a Defence Secretary, also a Foreign Secretary under the previous Conservative governments, or quite a while ago now. And his point was actually that if you're not someone who served in the military, then the generals don't necessarily think that you are trying to out-general them, and that there can be a mutual respect. So I don't think that necessarily has to play against Wes Streeting at all. In terms of the special relationship, as we know, or think we know, extends way beyond who happens to be in the Oval Office, who happens to be in 10 Downing Street. Yes, of course, relations soured quite significantly between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. It'd be fascinating to see how Andy Burnham gets on personally with the president. But I do think it is interesting that you do have a series of Labour Secretaries of State, Labour ministers, who in the past have said really rather challenging things, and things that I would largely support, about Donald Trump. And Wes Streeting, we know how seriously he takes the political threat from reform. Reform, you could say, are arguably the ideological bedfellows of Donald Trump. So on the one hand, you have Wes Streeting taking on reform politically here in the UK. On the other hand, he realises that in the interests of British security and in the interests of the special relationship, he needs to make an effort with Donald Trump, someone we know he profoundly disagrees with.
That's an interesting point, Greg, in that not just Wes Streeting, but the Labor government do have to play a delicate game of basically fighting against and Matthew is right, the closest equivalent to the MAGA movement in the United Kingdom being reform, whilst cozying up, in inverted commas, in some respects, to the Trump administration in the United States.
Yeah, well, it sounds like so far so good. I think the phone call with Andy, between Andy Burnham and the president on Monday was a really wise move by the prime minister. And if Wes Streeting is trying to accomplish the same thing, David Lammy faced the same kind of challenge. He had said all kinds of nasty things about the president. I agree with most of us on the panel tonight that, just about everybody in labor has made those comments. The president is not one to hold grudges, well, not permanently anyway. And so he's been able to kiss and make up with a lot of the prior ministers, and so
let's hope he didn't kiss them all.
That's true. But I think there's a moment where the president is he really is fond of the UK, as we've all agreed, and that special relationship will go beyond President Trump and beyond the current administration, the current cabinet in the UK. We've had some speed bumps before. We had them during the Biden years. Below the surface of these top ministers and the president are military leaders that are doing, they're doing the exercises in the North Atlantic, they're doing the submarine stuff. So those things continue, and so it really doesn't matter ultimately. I think what's more important for Wes Streeting and the entire cabinet is allocating budget for defense.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And we will, of course, be discussing Trump in a bit. He kept me awake for a further 40 minutes last night with his speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I'm not sure I fully got my head around it, but hopefully I will in the next hour. Before that, though, still ahead on The Late Show Live, the Home Office is granting visa sponsorship powers to stores selling anti-Semitic and extremist texts. Does that really sound like a good idea? But first tonight, Andy Burnham's new Solicitor General has been accused of sympathising with the terrorist organisation Hamas after photos resurfaced showing him with their senior leadership. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain is not just a geographical expression. We are a people bound together by history and culture that are distinctively British. Join me to celebrate our music, theatre, artworks and literature, which we can explore and enjoy together.
Everybody's welcome.
Sunday with Michael Portillo. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I've been in Westminster for a long time, but I know that though power may be here, its effect on people's lives is across the whole of the country. We may be where rules are made, but it's where they're implemented that matters. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for forthright and frank discussion on where Britain has come from, where it's going, and where it will end up. That's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Vox Populi, Vox Dei.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Well, Andy Burnham's new Solicitor General has been accused of being a Hamas sympathiser after pictures emerged of him meeting with senior leaders from the terror group. Andy Slaughter took a so-called fact-finding mission to Jerusalem back in 2010 with none other than Jeremy Corbyn. They met with both sides of the Palestinian political spectrum, including members of Hamas, who they took the time to pose with for pictures. In his new role, which he was appointed to earlier this week, Slaughter's now in a charge of deciding whether or not groups should be prescribed as terrorists. The Shadow Justice Secretary, Nick Timothy, called his appointment to the Cabinet a disgrace. Well, let's go to my panel. Benedict, I'll go with you. Look, in one respect, I understand speaking with a wide group of people to better understand the political context of an area, including the Middle East. At the same time, the fact that photos were taken, and I'm just looking there, they seem to be quite friendly-looking photos, would suggest that the optics here are terrible.
They are. I think that there's a certain degree of blindness when it certainly pre-October 7th. I think that there was a huge degree of blindness from amongst a lot of Western politicians about what the true nature of Hamas was and the scale of the destruction that it could wrought. And I think in many ways that stems from the fact that Israel was seen as being so militarily superior to Hamas that it almost didn't matter. It came as a real shock to a lot of people when they wrought as much death and devastation. I think that there was always that understanding that there were elements within Hamas that wished to do this, but I think actually a lot of people were very naive to actually what it was that it could achieve because they simply weren't paying attention. Ultimately, you know, when we weren't focusing on one of the so-called forever wars in the Middle East, people immediately take their eye off the ball, and then you get certain cranks like Jeremy Corbyn, for whom this is, you know, a particular issue, and he's prepared to meet all kinds of people. I think we also do need to remember that when you are meeting with almost any political movement in the Middle East, there is likely to be a provisional wing to that organisation if it's not in a state like Israel. You know, if you go to places like Libya or something like that, you are inevitably going to end up talking to people. Yemen, for instance, as well. You're going to end up talking to people who may present themselves as politicians, but they also have very close ties to all kinds of militias. Yeah. Iraq is an example of that as well. I think the proof is going to be in the pudding for Mr. Slaughter. Whether or not he actually makes sensible decisions whilst in office, I think you've got to give him that opportunity because, you know, he will live or die by his own record.
Hillary, does the naivety of mid-wit socialists cut it for you as an excuse?
Absolutely not, Will. It would be if this was a one-off instance and maybe Jeremy Corbyn made just a little mistake. No, absolutely not. This is consistent with his track record, and that's what exacerbates this and compounds the ghastly position that he's taken, not the first time, I must say.
Yeah, but Greg, I want to hone in on the new Solicitor General, Andy Slaughter. Again, just looking at that photo, it did look very chummy, and it's sometimes dangerous to draw too many conclusions from one isolated photograph, but particularly if his ideological leanings are in any way comparable to Corbyn, I don't think it's a stretch to say that there may have been, if not solidarity, some sympathy for the Hamas mission.
Yeah, look, if it was a one-off situation, one picture on a humanitarian mission or something like that, okay, that's fine. We can give it a pass. But if the pattern is suggesting that he's sympathetic to a terrorist organization, a really nasty terrorist organization, by the way, that's unacceptable. And I think he will be compromised. And that's not something that gives people in the UK comfort. We're going through it here in the US with these lunatic, sort of the DSA, Democratic Socialist of America, candidates that are winning primaries in the Democratic elections. It's really unsettling and troubling. We have a mayor in New York, Mamdani, who's definitely sympathetic to terrorists. So, I mean, some people have called him a terrorist. Maybe that's not fair, but just being sympathetic to them is troubling.
Matthew, do you agree with Nick Timothy that this appointment is a disgrace?
I'd be very surprised if Mamdani is sympathetic to terrorists, and that's obviously a libelous thing to say, potentially.
Yeah. He is.
But on the case of Andy Slaughter, I'm certainly not aware of a pattern that he's sympathetic to terrorists.
Let's go to Andy Slaughter for now.
Yeah. However, on the issue of Hamas pre-October the 7th, I don't agree with Benedict. I think there was plenty of evidence that Hamas was an evil organisation, and I'd include the political leadership in that. I mean, as far as I understand it, they were throwing political opponents off buildings pre-2010. What I should say is that the political wing was not proscribed as a terrorist organisation until 2021, which was significantly after that photograph was taken. That said, would I have been seen photographed with the political wing of Hamas when Andy Slaughter was, with a smile on my face? Absolutely not. So I think it is problematic. But it would also be problematic if photographs appeared of Labour politicians or any politicians smiling, beaming with Netanyahu. That would be immensely unpopular in this country as well. And there is an argument, and to an extent I agree with Benedict earlier on this, that if you want to bring peace to a region, you have to be able to talk to both sides. And we would not have got the Good Friday Agreement and largely sorted out the terrible issue of the Troubles in Northern Ireland had both sides not been brought around a table.
I just want to very quickly get, Benedict, your response to the comparison between being seen with Netanyahu relative to being seen with Hamas. Do you think that is a fair equivalence to draw?
I don't think it is a fair equivalent to draw, but I can understand why it would be difficult for a Labour politician, because a lot of Labour supporters have a pretty, irrational response to the sight of Benjamin Netanyahu. I think we have to recognise that, Benjamin Netanyahu, as much as you may sort of dislike him for his politics, he is democratically elected. And Hamas, the first thing that we all know that they did when they got elected in Gaza was they turned around and said, no more elections, that's that done. Netanyahu, at the very least, subjects himself to the views of the Israeli
public. But he's done very bad things in Gaza. Look, I've got no time for Hamas, so
but we've got
an evil organisation.
But then you've just got to go back.
Netanyahu has done really wicked things.
You then have to go back to what I said at the start, which is that almost every political organisation in every Middle East country, with the exception actually of Israel, I would say that that's a separate thing, because you can't say that the state is, the IDF has different sort of links towards different political parties. But in just about every other country where there is, shall we say, a little bit of political chicanery, every organisation, every political party, be that Lebanon, be it Syria, be it Iraq, they all have ties to extra-martial militias. That's just the state of play in that region.
OK, I need to go to a spokesman for the Attorney General's office who has said appointments to the government are carefully considered by the Prime Minister. The Solicitor General will carry out his duties, including any role in oversight of prosecutorial decisions, with the political impartiality and adherence to the rule of law that the role demands. The Solicitor General has been consistent in condemning the actions of Hamas and has long supported a two-state solution in which a viable Palestinian state and Israel can live in peace side by side. OK, well, still ahead on The Late Show Live.
But just like my presidency, the second time is always better. It's always better. And the third time will be better yet.
Well, they say that in every joke there's a kernel of truth. I wonder whether there is one there. That was President Trump, who has joked about running for an unprecedented third term in his vicious White House speech. And could that actually soon be a reality? But first tonight, the Home Office is granting visa sponsorship powers to stores selling anti-Semitic and extremist texts. Does that really sound like a good idea? This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GBNews.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News,
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there.
With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again.
To start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Will Kingston. Still ahead, Andy Burnham has been urged to convert women's prisons into jails for men to reduce overcrowding and the early releases of criminals. Could that help solve Britain's prison crisis? Well, before we move on to a new story, as I look at my Instagram stories cheekily during the break, ladies and gentlemen, I've noticed Ben Leo put up a photo of, me actually, on the television saying, I can't keep away watching you now, Will Kingston. Obviously concerned that I may crater his ratings. So please, ladies and gentlemen, do not turn off, because he can be very scary. But I do hope that, Ben, you are having a lovely holiday. Let's go to the next story. The Home Office has allowed several Islamic bookshops, some selling anti-Semitic and extremist texts, to sponsor dozens of migrants to come to the UK with skilled worker visas. Available in these shops are works from an author who's written advice on how to beat your wife, and a book claiming that Jewish people have a wicked nature. There's no suggestion the bookshops themselves have broken any rules, and all the texts are legally allowed to be sold in the UK, but it raises more questions about what actually constitutes a skilled worker. With me now is political commentator Fahima Mohammed. Fahima, good to see you. Do you think this is an appropriate use of the skilled worker visa program?
Well, I think we need to obviously, like you said, separate the issues. Like, firstly, are these books objectionable or potentially unlawful? And are the businesses abusing the visa sponsorship system? And are the individual sponsored workers genuinely filling illegible jobs? Now, I don't think they would be given those kind of jobs unless, of course, they actually have been obviously, gone through the actual system. So again, I think that would the story even exist if these were Christian or Jewish bookshops selling controversial theological books? I think if the Home Office believes that these businesses are unsuitable, why did it grant the licenses? And I do feel that at the end of the day, we do need to obviously make sure that, we do have sort of consistency when it cuts both ways, whether it's criticism of Islam, Christianity, or anything else as being lawful. And obviously, at the same time, when it comes to the actual sponsored license, it has to obviously have a certificate of moral approval.
Fahima, I think the distinction is that I don't believe that you would find a book in a Christian bookstore that would either claim that Jewish people have a wicked nature or would provide written advice on how to beat your wife. I think that's a false equivalence you're drawing.
Well, Ibn Waraq is Why I'm Not a Muslim, is another book directly severe critique of Islam. Ayan Hirsi Ali is Heretic and Infidel, is strongly critical of Islam doctrine and Muslims. Christopher Hitchin, God is Not Great. Yep. Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion. There's Douglas Murray, The Strong Death of Europe. So all of these arguments about immigration and European culture, these books are sold openly. Some Muslims do regard them as very distorted, insulting, and, prejudice, but
surely, Fahima, you can see that, and I've read most of those books that you just mentioned, you can see the distinction between God is Not Great, which is written by an evolutionary biologist, and a book which literally provides advice on how to beat your wife. These are entirely different types of texts.
I am not defending anything which is unlawful under British law. So the British law, of course, protects a large amount of speech that many people consider hateful, disturbing, or repugnant. The threshold for criminal liability is higher than this book contains an appalling passage. However, selling a publication can become criminal where the legal ingredients of an offence are met. So there's a difference as well. So again, if it's stirring up racial hatred, if there's terrorist publications, things like that. So you may not like it. It may not be part of anything. I personally wouldn't like it, even for my own faith, where it's been told in that way. Muslims also disagree with many theologians as well as scholars. I myself have stood up and spoke against many of the Muslim, whether it's doctrine, culture, or anything like that. We're not disputing that. But again, at the same time, we should also be the same when it comes to having this outrage for every other faith.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think some people may suggest that there is a double standard there where in the past there have been people who have been arrested for stirring up racial hatred for burning a Quran in this country, and at the same time books like that can be sold. But I do want to get to the second point that you did mention, and you delineated it well, as to whether or not this is an appropriate use of skilled worker visas. Now, by all accounts, the bookshops themselves have abided by the rules. So if there is a problem here, it is a problem with the Home Office, to your point. Do you think that there are problems with the skilled worker visa system?
Well, I think that's, why are we importing bookshop workers instead of doctors, of course? So, of course, I actually agree with the fact that we need to first establish what jobs they were actually sponsored for. The article does not tell us if there's any fraudulent retail sponsorship, that should be stopped. Obviously, we cannot, just rely on a newspaper, and we cannot replace it with compliance investigation. So, again, we need to basically identify that. And again, we need to obviously understand how, these kind of visas are issued with the sort of certificate. And of course, we need to understand the application of that certificate, but not proving that a visa was granted or that the person entered Britain is actually fraudulent just by mere assumption.
Fahima, great to chat to you as always. Let's go to the panel now. Matthew, I'll start with you. I think Fahima did delineate the two issues here very well, and I'd like to take them in turn. On that first issue of whether or not there is, and again, I think, subject to not knowing exactly what is going on in those specific books, but I think there should be a very high bar for freedom of speech limitation in this country. I think that bar is sometimes arbitrarily set depending on the subject matter. But how do you feel about generally this story and those two limbs?
I thought Fahima spoke brilliantly, and I think it was right to draw that delineation. I mean, obviously, I don't like books that are anti-Semitic. As someone who's half Jewish myself, I don't like books that are prejudiced against anyone. I certainly don't like books that give you a guide as to how to beat up your partner. I mean, it's absolutely sickening. I'm surprised that that is legal in the United Kingdom. I suspect that this story has been plucked out because it involves an Islamic bookshop. But I think there is a much more important, wider question here, and that is who is entitled, which sort of business is entitled to bring in skilled workers. And the Home Office response to this is that because they've raised the salary threshold of what constitutes a skilled worker, the sort of business that we're talking about is incredibly unlikely to get a licence. And by the licence, I think that means a licence to then bring so-called skilled workers in. My view is we should be employing where we can British workers, and there are far too many people, for all sorts of reasons, good and bad, who are not working and not contributing properly to our economy. That's where our focus should be. I would also say, because I think it's important to recognise this, that this government, perhaps partly because of rules brought in by the previous Tory government belatedly, they have brought net migration, and I'm sure you'll talk to me about simply inward migration, but we've tended to judge this by net migration, have brought net migration figures crashing down.
Benedict, Matthew mentioned the salary threshold. I believe for a skilled worker visa, it is now £41,700. Now, and there is no suggestion of any wrongdoing from a legal perspective from these bookshops. I would also suggest that sounds like a very high salary for someone working in a bookstore, and we are aware of plenty of cases where skilled worker visas have been used in places like kebab shops, effectively, and they're little more than window dressing for fraud. Again, without in a general sense, this is a concern with the skilled worker program, is that it can be open to abuse.
It can, but the thing with that is it's ultimately down to the government to set the guidelines as stringently as it can, and also to investigate suggestions where there is wrongdoing and to prosecute. You are always going to get chancers who will try to break any system. Immigration is simply one of those, and any sort of issue around visas. If you can get people to come into a country and you can make money out of sponsoring people to come and work in that situation, people will absolutely do that. So I think that is where the burden lies on the government to actually make the rules more stringent. And what I would say is actually, if they are changing these thresholds retrospectively, okay, fine. Lots of people will have come into the UK having flouted rules. Lots of people will continue to try to do so. But I think at least there is a recognition that the previous system was ridiculous, especially some of the numbers of people brought into this country for all sorts of reasons on Boris Johnson's watch in particular. That's one that I think people feel most strongly about. Yes, our immigration system has been a bit haphazard, a bit slapdash. But all you can say right now is that it's at the forefront of the national agenda. Slowly, that is being changed.
All right, Hilary, I want to go to you. Put aside the skilled worker visas for a second. If you do see an Islamic bookshop which is selling books which promote unpalatable and radical parts of Islamic or Islamist ideology, like, for example, violence towards women, should those bookshops be allowed to operate?
Well, I don't think so. In a civilized society, Western civilization shouldn't allow that across all of Europe, let alone in the UK. But I would like to reference two things. Number one, I think there should be consistency. So we shouldn't have violent rhetoric no matter what side, but definitely, obviously, it's coming from one particular side. But also, Will, think about what imams have been preaching in the UK. They are saying that we are going to invade and bring down the West by three means. One, by migration. Two, taking advantage of your liberal laws. And this fits exactly into that, Will, that they're taking advantage of the very welcoming, very accepting rules and the civilized sort of environment that the UK has always prided itself on, being very accepting of other cultures, and also through the womb. Those are the three ways that the imams are preaching, and they're doing it. And this is a classic example of being accepting, being open as a society, and look at the result of being so open. I think it's only there it's going to basically encourage more of this if those that purport and support violence aren't thwarted in any regard.
Greg, I apologise, we're running short of time, but I'll start with you at the top of the next hour. A Home Office spokesman has said, thanks to our decisive action to raise the skilled salary threshold, these kinds of businesses are incredibly unlikely to get a licence approved. Companies must apply for the appropriate sponsor licence. The holding of a licence does not guarantee that it is in use, nor that any sponsored visa application will be approved by the Home Office following a rigorous assessment process. Holding a sponsorship licence is no guarantee of visa, and all licences of a visa, I should say, and all licences are determined on a case-by-case basis. To further protect the system from abuse, more than 100 occupations have been cut from overseas recruitment access. Meanwhile, skilled sponsor revocations went up by 950% in 2025 compared to 2023. More coming up in the next hour, ladies and gentlemen. Please stay with us, including this.
But just like my presidency, the second time is always better. It's always better. And the third time will be better yet.
Thank you to our global community for watching and listening to GB News. We're not only the #1 news channel in Britain, we're chosen by you around the world.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there with the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right. GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question.
Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way.
You will not want to miss it, trust me. The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Live from London, England, this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Breaking tonight, several people have been injured and one person has tragically died after a car was driven into a crowd at a Pride event in Berlin. This is an evolving story. We'll be bringing you updates as we have them. Elsewhere, also breaking tonight, winning back Washington, Wes Streeting will make a fresh charm offensive towards Donald Trump. But will it work?
Don't pay any attention whatsoever to what Donald Trump says.
And prison plans will be kicking off at the top of the hour. Andy Burnham has been urged, to convert women's prisons into jails for men to reduce overcrowding and the early release of criminals. And Trump's third term. The president jokes about running for an unprecedented third term in his vicious White House speech. Just a joke or perhaps a kernel of truth there?
Just like my presidency, the second time is always better. It's always better. And the third time will be better yet.
He's such a troll. Elsewhere, Britain and America are reportedly planning to convene a high-level meeting in London on the Strait of Hormuz.
We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do.
I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live, ladies and gentlemen, for a second hour. Thank you very much for staying with us, and thank you to my panel for staying with me. In London, we have political commentators Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlin, and in Washington, D.C., the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and political commentator Hilary Fordwich, all veterans of The Late Show Live, and it is great to see you all once again. Moving on to more big news this evening. Campaigners are calling on Andy Burnham to convert at least one women's jail to take male prisoners in order to avoid having to release offenders early. The Prison Reform Trust, backed by senior Tories, also suggested releasing all pregnant women and mothers with babies to ease overcrowding. Britain currently has 3,500 female prisoners, but more than half of those are incarcerated for non-violent crimes. This week, Andy Burnham paused Starmer's early release scheme, which aimed to free up much-needed space, but there doesn't yet appear to be an alternative solution. Well, let's go to the panel now. Benedict, on the assumption that you will not have men and women mixing in women's prisons, and I assume that is the case, this sounds sensible?
I think it is. Honestly, we find ourselves in a position where, you know, the number of prisons that have been closed in the UK is obviously, and rather not then subsequently been replaced, is ridiculous. And this goes all the way back to the coalition government and then the Conservatives as well. And it was something that George Osborne sort of factored in, basically, when he was going through his cuts to various government budgets, which people wouldn't care too much, ultimately, about the suffering of prisoners, and they don't really care about paying lawyers, and they certainly don't care about paying prison staff, so you could hack at the Ministry of Justice budget. Well, now that's come home to roost, and we have the situation where we are seeing potentially very dangerous prisoners being released. I think it needs to be made clear this is not going to be something in which, you know, violent female prisoners would end up being released at any stage in order to make way for these people. And it's also worth pointing out that actually the percentage of the prison population that is female, that is in there for violent crime, is significantly lower than it is amongst men. So even if you were releasing women early, by and large, they're much less likely to be violent. Ultimately, if this is a question of keeping dangerous sex offenders, violent criminals, murderers are not, you know, necessarily being considered a part of this, but say armed robbers, that sort of thing, people who might be led back into very damaging lives of crime were they to be released early, I think actually this is a perfectly suitable solution.
Well, it sounded like murderers were being considered as part of this early release scheme.
Not the very worst kind of murderers, though. There will be some people who have, you know, served a significant amount of time.
If PC Harper's killer or killers were being considered as part of this release scheme, I would consider them to be some of the worst.
Not the driver, two of the people, the other two people. No, to be fair, I agree with that particular case. I think there's a really egregious example of violence being committed, and I do think it's wrong that those two people should be released at all. But I think it's worth pointing out that it's not the driver that's being considered for the early release.
In case it's been paused for now, and I think you're right in saying that the decisions that the previous Tory government made now look absolutely ridiculous. You know, I would have said at the time, but particularly now with the benefit of hindsight. Matthew, think of this. In England and Wales, 18 prisons closed between 2010 and 2015, removing around 5,300 places. And looking across a longer period, 2011 to 2017, 21 prisons closed. That should be useful now.
So Andy Burnham, I think, I was not a fan of the coup in inverted commas against Starmer, but he has had a very good first week. I mean, even a senior writer at The Spectator was praising his first week in power. He's done some popular things. He's got off on the front foot. Very, very different to the sort of things we saw in the early weeks of Keir Starmer's prime ministership. However, now that he's done the popular thing of, for example, pausing the early release of these prisoners, he's actually got to do the difficult thing, which is to work out, so what is his answer? Because unfortunately, you might say outrageously, our prison system does not seem to be fit for purpose. We don't seem to have capacity. That's a very serious place for a country to be in, because a government's first duty is to keep us safe from foreign threats and safe from dangerous people within our own society. I wish that we had more prisons, quite frankly, although there is an important caveat to that, and it is this, that I think we know that often prison simply doesn't work. So you stick someone in prison, and perhaps this is particularly true of shorter sentences, you stick someone in prison, they come out, what sort of life do they return to? How likely are they to reoffend? Possibly very likely. So this is really thorny, difficult stuff. But if it is a choice between releasing people, violent men who might go on to reoffend, and repurposing a women's prison, then probably I'd go for the latter. But I'm not a fan of it, because women are capable of doing bad stuff as well as men.
Greg, would this sort of early release scheme, which has been suggested by the Labor government and now paused, receive any, or how would it be received in the United States if that was to be proposed?
Well, not very well, but you do have, we've been infiltrated by liberal, not only liberal judges, but especially the progressive prosecutors that were funded by George Soros, and basically they are acting as public defenders when they're supposed to be prosecutors. So we have a real crime problem here in the U.S. because of those prosecutors, so-called prosecutors, in all the big cities, and only really in Florida have they been able to manage that process and get rid of these radical prosecutors. And you can impeach judges too, and they're doing that there as well. It's why everyone wants to move to Florida. But yeah, it wouldn't go over here very well. But I think, you know, I'm with most of the panel here that, you know, I think the UK needs more prisons. So it's a good start converting the women's prisons, but it's not that hard to build prisons, and you can even do it in, you know, you can even privatize that and have the private sector get involved. I know that staffing them is going to require some budget as well, but as Matthew said, that it is the primary role of government. It's not welfare, it's not all the other nonsense that they spend money on. It's protecting the people and the citizens.
Well, Hillary, it's interesting that Greg says it's not that hard to build prisons, and in theory it shouldn't be, but I've done a bit of reading on this, and the past Conservative government, and I've heard from several sources, basically said, yes, getting the bricks and mortar up and putting the bars in place, you know, and putting all the sloppy rubbish food in there is not too difficult. The hard part is, as you would know from being born in this country, that the amount of regulations, the amount of boxes that need to be ticked, the amount of work that has to be done to push through any sort of building process, let alone one that will house violent people, through the administrative state, in inverted commas, makes it almost impossible. And it's a reflection more generally of the stasis in this country, that you can't build a prison, again, not necessarily because the resources aren't there, but because we're tying ourselves up in knots with legal requirements.
Well, I would say, you know, compared to the US, as Greg says, it's easy to build prisons here. We've got a vast nation with the tiny footprint, really, of the UK. It's obviously more difficult. And don't talk to me about threatening the green belt. From where I grew up beautifully in Surrey, I mean, lots of things have been built there. Where every time I go back, I'm a little bit shocked at what, you know, the green belt's being built on now. But I would say this, a couple of things. Number one, I don't understand, Will, when they say about it's got to be repurposed for men, unless they mean a lot more security. Forget making it cushier. I don't know what they're doing to repurpose it. No, just shove them in the same place unless it means more security, number one. Number two, I have first-hand knowledge through a very, very close friend of mine in the UK whose husband is a senior executive in a catering company. And when you said about, you know, in the prisons and cushy situations, let me tell you how cushy they are. Do you know they have to order, they have to prepare like 17 choices of halal meals? No. When people commit a crime, shove them in there, give them whatever food, and you know what? If you don't eat what we eat, and if you don't eat what a Church of England Christian nation eats, tough nookies, then maybe that would help them prevent crimes. Stop offering all these halal meals.
Matthew, should halal and kosher food be served in prisons?
I'm not a fan, actually, of the halal method of slaughter, although actually I think from my own research, the vast majority of halal killings are the animals are stunned first. I'm not a fan of the Sashita method, the Orthodox Jewish method of killing animals either. So I actually, and not for the sort of cultural wars reasons or the bigoted reasons that some people on the hard and far right want it cancelled, but actually for the welfare of animals, I would like that banned in this country.
It's the cost. It's the cost. It's the cost. Why on earth, when someone's committed a crime in a Christian country, should they be accommodated with, oh, we don't like that food, oh dear, we don't eat this food?
Well, I think
no,
you're both agreeing
it's the cost.
Well, that as well. Sorry, Benedict.
I actually would say that there's a fairly easy line to draw on this. I don't think meat should be served in prisons. Actually, I think it's bizarre that we've actually come to... No, I think it's bizarre that we've got to a position where people almost feel entitled to eat meat with every meal. It used to be something that you had once, maybe twice a week, and it was something that was very expensive because it took a lot of effort to raise animals. And actually, this goes slightly towards what Matthew is saying, which is about animal welfare. We have a surplus of meat now at the moment in countries like the United States and the UK because people demand it and they think they have some sort of right to it. The quality is appalling. The suffering of the livestock is appalling. And actually, I do think, as a sort of a first rule, saying, no, you don't get meat in a prison because it should be considered something of a luxury, something that you've actually had to sort of invest extra amount of money for. You can get your protein from pulses and grains.
Let me add a point here. The way I kept my boys under control was to tell them whenever they were naughty, I will only serve you tuna fish and that's all you have for dinner for a week, and they didn't do anything naughty. If everybody knew that they were going to get tuna fish in prison, maybe they wouldn't commit the crimes.
Maybe this is an element of rehabilitation that we haven't considered, is just, the food choices. You will very rarely, in fact, you will never hear me, ladies and gentlemen, argue for veganism on this channel, with the one exception being I'm all for veganism in prisons. They don't deserve steaks at all. All for a Benedict. I think that's a wonderful idea. That's all we've got time for on that particular topic, though, ladies and gentlemen. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do.
Britain and America are reportedly planning to convene a high-level meeting in London on the Strait of Hormuz, but also tonight, Andy Burnham is reportedly planning to hand mayors a share of income tax revenue to spend on their cities in sweeping devolution plans. This is The Late Show Live on the People's Channel, GB News. As you know, if you were watching with me last night, Donald Trump gave a much anticipated speech at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, and this particular remark has been getting a lot of attention.
My intention to run for a fourth term as President of the United States. I will be doing that. I will be having an official. In fact, I think I have, I won 3 times. Now I'm going to do it again.
You might have spotted his Trump 2028 cap as well. It's not the first time, of course, he's suggested running for a third term, but as things stand, it's forbidden by the US Constitution. So, was he winding people up or was he testing the waters? Let's go now to political strategist Tiffany Marie Brannan. Tiffany, great to chat to you. And a special thank you for sharing my clip that I put up from the Saturday 5 a bit earlier, getting it out to an American audience. I appreciate it.
It was great. Well, are you kidding? I'm going to share that, repost you all day long.
Well, you can keep coming on the show then. Let's go to Trump. Look, he was trolling. He wasn't being serious in my view, but I want to get your thoughts on the speech more generally because, to be honest, I don't think it was his best work. I think even he conceded it was his best work, wasn't his best work, when he basically threw his speechwriters under the bus from memory about halfway through, and he said, oh, this is the first time I've got a laugh from this crowd. What are these speechwriters doing? None of these stupid jokes have landed. What did you make of it more generally than just this one particular comment?
Absolutely. First of all, you're correct. This is him trolling, and the entire history behind the whole, multiple term president thing is an entirely different can of worms to open. But I think you're right. I love listening to the president's speeches. I was doing live reporting on his speech in Mount Rushmore earlier this month, and I was there during the 4th of July for his speech that evening, and those were wonderful speeches. And I've heard him speak, with great eloquence and humor before, whether that was the RNC or whatever, and this speech just didn't seem to hit home. And I say that as someone that's actually friends with a few of his speechwriters, so I don't want to throw my own friends under the bus. However, even he said that little off-the-cuff remark. He was like, I don't like this speech. There's been one funny part so far. This is horrible. Who wrote this for me? So I think you're totally right. I think that it seems to me that it perhaps was rewritten since the first Correspondents' Dinner was supposed to have taken place in April, and probably wasn't given, especially with everything that's going on between, the Iran war and the midterms coming up, probably wasn't given the same amount of attention that it would have been given had he had the original speech back in April.
And I noticed just his body language when those awards were given out at the start of the night. He did look a bit glum, a bit down. That may have been because he fundamentally disagreed with awards for CNN journalists. But it should also be noted that this is a difficult time for the president. The Iran war is not going the way that I imagine he would have wanted it to go. The midterms are coming up and the Republicans are under an enormous amount of pressure. This is a difficult period for him.
Absolutely. And I think that there's so much going on that while it was wonderful that they did reschedule this because, you know, the members of the press do work very hard and it is a really special night for them to come together, no matter what side of the aisle they're on or what outlet they're from, to enjoy and be, you know, I've said this before, it's very rare in this world for the members of the press to have such freedom of speech that they can sit in a room and share dinner with the very president that they spend all year perhaps criticizing. And so I think that it's uniquely American and very beautiful. And so there is so much going on right now that while it was very important that they did have this dinner after the horrible incident back in April, I think that the timing's a little rushed and he's exhausted. There's so much going on and there's only so much that could be done. And
Tiffany, in the past, comments which could be considered to be nasty in nature from Donald Trump have led to uproar. You know, Rosie O'Donnell got her usual spot in the speech at one point. You know, fake news media got hammered. You know, there was some, and it was getting late at night at that stage, so I'm struggling to remember specifics. But there was some really, really biting and personal remarks that he made. Does that actually still lead to any sort of outrage in the US now, or is this all just factored in as part of the Trump show?
I think it's kind of become part of the Trump show, but this is always, I mean, this event's notorious for the one time of the year that usually the president goes out and says something biting or, you know, back to the press. Like the one comment he made last night that I loved was making fun of Caitlyn from CNN, confusing her with Dylan Mulvaney in the Budweiser commercial, Bud Light commercials. That one was pretty funny. But other than that, I think that he's such a unique outlier, and the fact that he's constantly criticizing the press and making little, you know, sarcastic comments that you don't usually get that from most presidents. So you usually get maybe like a hot mic moment, but we've become a little more normalized to him doing that. That has not been the case with presidents in the past.
And look, it's interesting thinking ahead because he's changed the rules of politics in so many ways. The days of that very formal statesman-like president may well be over. But how do you see the long-term future of the relationship between the president as a figurehead and the press? You know, do you think that Trump has changed the game, or do you think it will revert back to, you know, pre-2016 business as usual after he leaves the stage?
I don't think we can ever go back. I think you can look at examples, especially here in America, of, I mean, the people that are doing it really well right now, unfortunately, are the Democratic Socialists of America. You see this breaking that fourth wall and reaching into the people and humanizing it. You're no longer dealing with these very much like established politicians that have the sheen and the bureaucracy kind of behind them. You're dealing with people. People want authenticity. That's like the biggest push right now for voters and for the younger generation. And so with someone like Zohar Mamdani, they are funny, they're engaging, great marketing, great TikTok reels, really playing well on social media across the board. And that's because they understand that this is the new game and it's either you join or you die.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. As we look ahead to where Trump sits and where the Republicans sit, you probably have two contenders at the moment. You've got Rubio and Vance, who are trying to position themselves for that Republican nomination. Again, still a while away, but they'd both be thinking about it, I'm sure about that. How do you see the prospects for the Republicans both going into these midterms and then beyond?
So I really do think, as of now, I think that Vance has the best chance for 2028 going through. And he's even been very careful. Marco Rubio has been very careful to even say that he would support Vice President Vance should he run and get the nomination. And President Trump has intentionally not nominated anyone or given his backing to anyone and is kind of holding those cards really close. Now, for the midterm specifically, that has been a very interesting watch, because if you look back at the beginning of the year, Democrats only had like a 3% polling margin that they were ahead of us on. Now, as of some recent polling, they're at 11 points higher, at least in terms of, you know, taking Congress back, obviously. And I'm really hoping that's not true of the Senate, but it's become a little dicey, and that's because of mostly the Iran war and gas prices and things that a lot of, I think, the Republicans on the right that aren't so diehard have been black-pilled. Maybe they were first-time Trump voters, and they feel very black-pilled and negative because, you know, they wave the flag of, he said no new wars, no foreign wars, yet here we are. And they might not understand the fact that this was a war that had essentially been going on for 30 years, that it was a hot potato and it was going to land in somebody's lap, and it happened to land in President Trump's lap, and there's really not a lot we can do about it.
Tiffany, great to speak to you as always.
Thanks so much, Will. And keep posting good things.
I believe that was keep posting good things. I certainly will do that, or I'll attempt to do that for sure. Thank you, Tiffany. Let's go to the panel now. I'll start in DC, and Greg, I will go to you. You'll notice in that interview I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the third term joke, because I think there is precisely zero chance of it happening. But at the same time, there is a question that needs to be asked as to whether he should be joking about it. The United States takes their constitution very seriously, and they take their whole, no kings mantra very seriously. It was the whole reason the country was established in the first place. So I won't ask you whether or not you think it will happen, but do you think it is something he should be joking about?
Yeah, he jokes about a lot of things, and it's obviously a joke. And the fact that so much of the media was up in arms today, I did a Sky News show this morning, and they kept going back to it. And I thought, this is absurd. Why are we talking about this? I think the most important, I'm with Tiffany on this, the most important issue last night was that they did it, that they didn't roll over to the terrorist or to the assassin, and they actually went through and had the dinner. Much smaller venue. I thought Bev Turner wrote a nice article today about it. She was there. So it was a good moment. I don't take the jokes too seriously, and I agree many of the jokes didn't land. The president acknowledged that. And at the end of his speech, he said some really nice things about the press and freedom of speech. So he was a gentleman, which you don't normally expect from President Trump. And this is someone who's been really harassed by the same media that was at that dinner last night. They covered up they went along with the Russia collusion hoax. They fabricated the Charlottesville hoax. They basically went along with the great cover-up, the Joe Biden cover-up, and they colluded with the Biden campaign on the Hunter Biden laptop. So, he's got a lot of scar tissue with the press, and yet I thought he was a gentleman, especially at the end.
Matthew, I know you've seen bits and pieces of the speech, if not all of it. Your thoughts?
Well, Tiffany was talking about the fourth wall, and actually Trump broke the fourth wall. He smashed through the fourth wall when he blamed his speechwriter, didn't he?
Interesting line.
When one of his jokes did not go well, fell flat. I actually think, sadly, because of course it's not a joke, but it wasn't it's not a funny joke. But the biggest joke of the evening was when he said that the Iran war was going extremely well. As you heard Tiffany's assessment of the polling, I mean, that seems to be in no small part down to, so far, the relative failure of the Iran war. And I think one of the big mistakes that Trump made was to overpromise. If you are basically the most powerful person in the world, or one of the two of them, given how many nukes Putin has, but in reality really the most powerful in terms of conventional warfare, you can't go into a presidency and basically promise no foreign wars, because you just can't predict what's going to end up, as she says, on your lap. So I think he has made himself a real hostage to fortune there, and Republicans look likely to pay a heavy price in the autumn.
Following on from that, Hillary, if Trump had his time again, do you think he would still enter the conflict?
Well, a couple of things there. Well, if I could just add to that comment about no wars. He actually said no forever wars. And this isn't going to be a forever war. With regard to the speech, I do agree with Greg. I do think that President Trump was an absolute gentleman. What I will say, though, is that I think
in fairness, at times he was. At times I would argue that he was somewhat less chivalrous.
That's what I was going to go to, and I actually was just going to say that I think he missed a great opportunity because the left was watching. Now, President Trump lambasted the press last week because he gave an important speech and the left didn't even cover it. So my point, Will, is I think he missed a great opportunity to be far more gentlemanly the entire time, which he wasn't. He was at some juncture, Greg is right, but he wasn't consistent, number one. Number two, now I stayed up to watch it, and I know a lot of people who are diehard, into politics and covering it, etc., and probably all of us did. Your average person didn't. I know most of my friends didn't even watch it. Most people that are even highly educated didn't watch it. But this is the point. If it had been tight, concise, made a few good, quick little quips, he would have been quoted across media and people would have seen it firsthand, Will. He doesn't have many opportunities, only the State of the Union and a couple of other opportunities the entire year to have everyone's attention. So he missed a great opportunity, and the art of brevity would have served him well.
He's not funny, though, is he, guys? I remember President Obama. You might not like Obama, but he was a funny guy. I've never laughed, I don't think, at a single thing that Donald Trump has said, and I've seen him say a lot of things.
No, he's really funny. He's funny when he's natural. When he does his speeches, especially when he does his rallies, he's really amusing. But last night, I think it was just too canned.
It was, well, it also was too long.
Hour and 4 minutes. That's
it was way too long. It would have been 15 minutes, powerful, lots of sound bites, a few quick quips off there, and he would have got a lot of kudos for it.
He makes a habit of overstaying his welcome. You think about that terrible moment at the World Cup final when he hung out with the Spain team and just didn't leave the stage.
No.
You have to get out of the way of those photos. He can't help himself.
No, you need to look at the footage where they were actually doing the Trump dance, and the Spanish wanted them.
It was so embarrassing.
This is some MAGA hat on. He had a "Make America Spain Great" again as well.
This is semantics, and I don't really care. But I do want to cover off the more important conversation, which is whether or not Donald Trump is funny. Now, I think Benedict T is the funniest president in American history. I think his comic timing is unbelievable. I concede last night he wasn't, but I genuinely think, and I think this is something that so many people of his opponents have never been able to grasp, is that because he is so funny, that creates a likability which, again, can let him get away with so much more than the average politician.
Okay, so Greg and Hillary say that he is very deliberate.
Well, I want to hear from Benedict first.
Greg and Hillary say that he is deliberately very funny. Matthew says that he isn't. I'm going to come into the middle of this and say I laugh almost every time I hear him speak. So it doesn't really matter whether or not he's deliberately funny or not. I find the whole thing very entertaining. Perhaps I wouldn't if I was in America, but that's just me. I would say it is getting slightly more tired, though, and it's interesting to hear both Greg and Hillary also talk about the length of time in which he speaks. Once upon a time, at the start, in 2016, and when he was sort of getting on the campaign trail and it was all starting to heat up, he was a lot more punchy, I think, than he is now. There's a lot more of that sort of meandering, a little bit more self-indulgence. He goes off at a tangent, and I think that's because a lot of his fans expect that of him, a lot of his supporters expect that of him. But I also think, and it's interesting, talking about the joke or whether or not the joke landed about him standing again in 2028, running again, rather. I think that's because actually he knows he's not going to. He knows that this is the farewell tour, and so he is where he gets the opportunities, taking liberties, going on a little bit too much. It's not as good. Seeing the Rolling Stones in concert now is not as good as it used to be. But the point is, for the fans, it brings back the nostalgia, it brings back the good old days. It's not that, sort of electrifying experience that it used to be, but that's the point. It's the farewell tour, and Donald Trump knows full well he's not going to be standing in.
I want your thoughts. GBNews.com/yours say, do you think Donald Trump is funny? And if so, what is your favourite Donald Trump gag or line? I'm going to give you mine. It was in the Oval Office with the Japanese Prime Minister when a Japanese reporter asked, why didn't you give us warning that you were going to strike Iran? And then Trump says, who knows better about surprise than Japan? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Oh, dearie, dearie me. I thought it was very, very funny. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Andy Burnham is reportedly planning to hand mayors a share of income tax revenue to spend on their cities in sweeping devolution plans. But also tonight...
This is a plane that the United States of America should have. Our Air Force One was 35, 36 years old, and it would be parked next to the new ones like this, and it really didn't look appropriate for our country.
A credible Iranian threat forced Donald Trump to switch Air Force One after the NATO summit. We'll discuss that shortly. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office.
Bit of a change on the cards today. We've got some spells of rain in the forecast, not feeling quite as warm as it did yesterday, especially across the south. But it's going to be a very cloudy picture to start the day. Some spells of rain, also some showers, especially across parts of the south and southeast where it has been very dry this summer so far. But actually a lot of the showers across the south will die away by this afternoon, allowing a return of the sunshine here. But the showers are set to continue across much of the north. Temperatures a touch down compared to yesterday as well, highs of around 25 degrees Celsius, but for many northern areas, highs between 17 to 19 degrees. To finish off the day, there'll still be some showery spells of rain, particularly across central and southern Scotland, but eventually starting to clear from the north, so some clearer skies, perhaps some late evening sunshine to finish off the day here. Still rather cloudy across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, the odd shower or two, and the odd one could be heavy, and a very similar story across Wales and parts of central England, but actually across much of the south to end the day, some sunny spells and still remaining mostly dry here. Overnight, we'll still continue to see some spells of rain drifting their way southwards. We'll see a mix of cloud and also some clearer skies. Quite a few clear skies across Scotland, so it's soon going to be turning a bit chillier here, especially across rural spots. We could reach around the mid-single figures, but actually most towns and cities still holding up between 10 to 15 degrees across parts of the south, but a little bit fresher than what we had this morning. Then into Monday, a bit of a mixed bag once more. Still some clouds, some showers feeding in from the west, the best of the brightness across the far east. And once again, the south is going to see another dry day with some sunny spells, perhaps some further spells of rain just pushing into Northern Ireland towards the end of the day. Temperatures starting to creep back up once again, pushing into the high 20s across southeast England and even across Northern Ireland and eastern parts of Scotland. A warmer day to come.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories. And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Well, Britain and the US are set to hold a high-level defence summit in London next week to work on building an international coalition to protect the Strait of Hormuz. The crucial shipping passage has been closed or severely restricted since the start of the war in February. 2 weeks ago, Iran began attacking vessels in the area, with the United States responding with 13 nights of intensive bombing raids. American officials have repeatedly stressed that the unconditional reopening of the strait will be a red line in any peace negotiation. The proposed summit in London would include representatives from most major Western powers, including the US Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth. Well, with me now is journalist and host of Toria Vision, Toria Brooke. Toria, great to see you. Why do you think that the US is trying to build up a coalition here? From what I've heard at various points from Pete Hegseth, he's basically said, particularly after that initial period where the UK refused to allow the US to use their bases, well, really, we don't need you. Your armed forces are pretty weak anyway. Why do you think they're now taking more of a coalition-led approach?
Well, recently we saw that President Trump actually formed the nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia, which I think is super relevant to this conversation, because right now the Yemeni Houthis are actually placing an embargo on Saudi Arabia through the Bab el-Mandeb. And so now we have the Red Sea and we have the Strait of Hormuz in play here. So this is no longer just about energy. This is about security. And I think that the US and the UK need to have an agreement. I think it's beneficial to both nations. And quite frankly, we can't have Iran continue to attack ships. I mean, the whole point of President Trump making this excursion in Iran was to really protect people and to get it open so that everyone can actually sail through there without having to pay a charge or worry about their ships being bombed. So right now, obviously, we are concerned with the oil prices, and I think that is going to go down as we continue to see security increase. And I'm personally optimistic about this negotiation with the UK.
This is something I've never fully been able to get my head around when it comes to this conflict, and that is that every geopolitical expert knew that the Strait of Hormuz was the choke point. They knew that if you close the Strait of Hormuz, you can do incredible damage to the world energy markets and cause a lot of disruption. It doesn't feel like the US were fully prepared for the ability of Iran to be able to effectively close off that choke point and then deliver the sorts of pressure to global energy markets. Do you think they've been caught on the hop in this conflict when it comes to the Strait?
I don't think that the U.S. is caught off guard, actually. I think President Trump usually is ahead of the curve. Right now, the fact that we are brokering a deal with the UK for more security, I think it is going to actually counteract Tehran and effectively their regional partners, because they're trying to have a monopoly over these multiple strategic energy chokeholds. So as I mentioned before, the Red Sea now is in play in addition to the Strait of Hormuz. And I just want to mention that, Iran announced that they did have lithium in the Hamadan province. Additionally, they've got copper, iron, uranium, lead, zinc, and chromite. So the rare earth mineral conversation is at play as well. It's no longer just about oil. And, for years, Saudi Arabia invested billions in its east-west pipeline, which allowed oil to move through the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea port of Yanbu. So now that the Yemeni Houthis are trying to attack them and place this embargo, like I mentioned prior, I think that the Saudi Arabia deal with the United States regarding the nuclear conversation, that is relevant here as well. So I do think President Trump has his reasons for brokering something with the UK, and I don't think this caught him by surprise.
Toria, thanks very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Benedict, I find this one difficult because in one respect, the US at various points have said, well, look, the UK Navy is a busted flush. We don't need your help. It feels a bit odd to me now that they're taking this kind of broader coalition-led approach when for a lot of this conflict, they've basically said words to the effect of, well, no worry, guys, we don't need your help. We can do this all on our own.
I think it's a curious thing, isn't it? Because I actually think that the war ultimately in the region was an inevitable thing. Whether or not it had to happen at this moment, it was going to happen, and that's not anything to do with the United States, it's to do with Israel and Iran. But drawing in other countries, that obviously was a choice that needed to be made. The United States decided it was going to prosecute the conflict in a certain way that has not actually led to results. It has then subsequently wavered for several different reasons, political expediency being one. That has caused, I think, a great deal of uncertainty amongst a lot of Gulf states, and those are obviously for various reasons very important. I think that in particular the nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia is particularly key in all of this. The United States, I think, is sort of scrabbling around trying to find people that it can help it prosecute the war further. It wants to make this much more of a sort of a civilizational conflict rather than simply the US and Israel versus Iran, because it believes that it'll have A, more international support for that, but B, also it might end up taking the strain off the US long term, and it will also reassure states in the region that the United States is not pulling out and about to abandon them, because there were genuine concerns and I think a lot of anger actually in certain Gulf states about how it was that the United States behaved in the early stages of that war. I think that there was a lot of PR needed to be done to try and fix that situation. Now, is giving Saudi Arabia nuclear technology at this stage the most sensible thing? That remains to be seen. It's very clear that that would be the early stage of developing weapons themselves, but it is now on the table. So, I think that explains why the US is now taking a different approach.
Matthew, should the UK participate? Well, again, it is assumed they will if it is in London, but put that to one side. Do you think on principle they should have set this up and participate in this? And if they do choose to do this, which they will now, what should their approach be?
It's a very good question, what the approach should be, what the line should be. I doubt the lines will shift much, if at all, from when Starmer was Prime Minister. I do think it's right to engage with America, of course. They are our most important ally. We've got to keep coming back to that reality, whatever Trump has done to undermine that. I would say that Trump, in this war with Iran, has made America weaker. Why? Because he has demonstrated that for all the might of the American military, they can't simply bully a wicked regime, and the Iranian regime is a wicked regime, into submission by blowing it to bits. because guess what? They are a state that sponsors terror, and when their backs are to the wall, they behave like terrorists, and they have choked off the Strait of Hormuz, and Americans are paying the price at the pump. I think the prices have gone above $4 again. We in this country are paying the price at the pump. We may pay the price in energy costs later on as well. I think Americans are suffering at the grocery store also. So this war for America so far has been pretty disastrous.
Greg, how do you respond to that, particularly the assertion, or the point that this has on balance made America weaker?
Well, definitely not. I mean, the American military, yes, is all-powerful, and I guess Matthew even admitted that.
But can you say it's all-powerful when they haven't been able to control the strait? Can you say it's all-powerful if they haven't been able to control the strait throughout this conflict?
Because the Iranian military has been devastated, but they still have drones. They still have some missile capacity. It doesn't take much. All you have to do is send one of those speedboats out and launch a missile at a commercial vessel. That's not demonstrating strength. The Iranian regime is so much weaker now. So yes, they're still a threat, but they're a threat with a 10% capacity of what they had 4 months ago. So and remember, I have to go back to the original reason for the war is to ensure, the primary reason, not the only reason, but the primary reason was to ensure that the regime would not have a nuclear weapon. That's still the case. But if the strait becomes a longer-term issue, we want to cost share that. We don't want to take the burden completely on the United States taxpayer to keep gas and natural gas and oil flowing through the strait for the benefit of global consumption. We don't need the natural gas, and we surely don't need the oil.
My question is
important, I think, to have some burden sharing.
What are you talking about? Look at the prices at the pumps. That is what gets presidents elected. It's what can dictate the terms of midterm elections.
I'm not
disputing. You say they've only got a few weapons that could disrupt commercial shipping. That is enough to choke off 25% of the world's oil, isn't it? And what America has done in this conflict is not eliminate the possibility that Iran gets a nuclear weapon, as far as we know, but it has shown how, even when it is being bombed to bits by the might of the American military, Iran still is powerful precisely because it is prepared to act like a terrorist state. You seem to be missing both of those blindingly obvious points.
Greg?
No, I'm not missing those. First of all, we understand that the price of gasoline at the pump is critical for politicians. The president knew there'd be some political capital spent on that. He knew he was taking a risk, and that's one he was willing to do because having the regime with a nuclear weapon was a lot more dangerous to the world and to the U.S. than having $4 gasoline prices. By the way, we haven't hit the $5 that we had in the Biden years. So that was because of hostility to the energy sector, not because of some short-term supply choke or chokehold in the Gulf. So, and as far as the other issues, I'm well aware of those risks, but it's important that the U.S. stays the course. I would prefer they just finish the job and just do another regime change, get the Israelis in, have some eliminations rather than just bombing infrastructure. But I think the fight is not over, but it's been devastating for Iran. You're right, the mullahs don't care because they're lunatic religious fanatics, but we will win this war. Ultimately, we would prefer to have it with some support from the other countries. And let me say one more thing.
No, one second. Greg, I want to ask a question. If the primary goal of this conflict was to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, why not just continue with the strategy that started under Midnight Hammer, which was targeted attacks on nuclear facilities, but falling short of the destruction of the top layers of leadership and the greater, all-out assault on Iran? Because it sounded like Midnight Hammer was a success. If that was the primary goal, why not just continue with that sort of exercise, perhaps every 6 months to a year, just to mow the grass to ensure that those military or those nuclear facilities aren't operational?
Well, great question, and I think we'll have to if the mullahs are still in charge, we'll have to continue mowing the lawn, over the next few years, because they still have the aspirations for a nuclear weapon. But I said primary, and so there's other issues involved. The ballistic missile program was very dangerous, especially to the region, not just to Israel, but to the region. So it wasn't, yes, nuclear capabilities was the primary issue, but the ballistic missiles and funding the terrorist proxies. So all of those things are important. That's why economic fury is important as well.
Hillary, your thoughts?
First of all, I would definitely take on the last point that Greg said. I would pursue economic fury. Why? And only against the mullahs. They don't care about their people. In classic warfare, yes, destroying infrastructure will eventually work. But I think, to your point, Will, and to Greg's point, one, we should focus on the military sites. Two, economic warfare, where we are finding and locating their cryptocurrencies, their properties, actually identifying their properties around the world, taking and crippling them financially. That's what matters to those mullahs. They're religious fanatics, as Greg said. So actually getting to their own pocketbooks, that's all they care about. They don't care about the 52,000 people that they killed. Now to a point that was mentioned earlier, one of the other panelists mentioned that Donald Trump has destroyed the special relationship. Wait a second. The Labour Party was actually sending in people to canvass in US states for Joe Biden. So there were plenty of moves before President Trump even came into office that were thwarting the special relationship. So it wasn't just President Trump at all.
Okay, we need to move on. Still ahead on The Late Show Live, you will not believe, ladies and gentlemen, the number of illegal migrants who have crossed the English Channel in Andy Burnham's first week in Downing Street. Well, perhaps you will, because I did mention it earlier. Plus, it's been revealed that President Trump was forced to swap planes at the NATO summit in Ankara. I'll reveal why shortly. This is The Late Show Live on the People's Channel, GBNews. Okay, let's look at some of the main stories on the front of tomorrow's papers, and we will start with the Sunday Express, which is reporting that Andy Burnham's reported care levy has been criticised by Reform UK's Robert Jenrick, who compares it to a death tax. The new Prime Minister has hinted over the years that if he bagged the top job, he would scrap what has been called a tax on death and replace it with a system that taxed the wealthy properly. He's previously championed for social care to be funded in a different way, and on his first day in office said he wanted it to operate on the NHS principle, free at the point of use. Now, Benedict, I was in the GB studios yesterday when I heard this. I first heard Patrick Christys say we may see Andy Burnham scrap an inheritance tax, and instantly my ears pricked up and I went, oh, you beauty, this could be actually quite an agreeable proposal from him, and one that I would wholeheartedly support. But then in the next breath, Patrick said it was to be replaced by yet another tax, and my optimism was diminished somewhat. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a tricky one because inheritance tax used to be a tax that affected actually a very small number of people, but largely because of inflation, it's increasingly affecting a lot more people than ever thought that they would end up needing to do so. This is a really tricky thing, though, because social care in this country is not being properly funded. And we had, of course, this with Theresa May trying to find a solution to it with the was it the bedroom tax? I think they ended up being called the death tax as well. But the problem with this is there doesn't appear to be the money to pay for huge numbers of people that do need social care. And on the one hand, it's not unfair, I think, to say that the older population of this country, which, let's be clear, has not in fact paid in anywhere near as much as it believes it has to the system in terms of things like pension contributions, they do need to somehow find a way of paying a little bit more from this. And therefore, I would say, are the ones that you might want to primarily go for. On the other hand, younger generations of people in this country have been massively hit by that same inflation, alongside a suppression in wage growth and, of course, a housing crisis, which means that a lot of them are relying on inheritance to actually get on the housing ladder in the first place, to start things like families. So it's a really tricky thing. I don't actually envy Andy Burnham on this, because I do think that trying to find a solution is going to be necessary, and I do think it's going to involve trying to sort of raise taxes on accrued wealth from older people. But at the same time, that wealth needs to be trickling down to younger people to allow them to kickstart start their lives and start the families that are actually required to keep a society functioning. And this proposal won't allow that to happen.
Yeah, so we still don't know details fully, but we do have some hints. So in 2021 at the Labor conference, Burnham suggested a national care service could be funded through a care levy of 10% on assets, savings and homes, with a payment plan possibly to be agreed when someone reaches the age of 65. Matthew, would you support such a measure?
I think these sorts of measures should actually be subject to a national conversation because we haven't really talked about it, and it is so important how a country treats its elderly. I've seen the sort of care that my father was able to receive on the NHS in his dying weeks and months, and it was largely phenomenal. It really, really matters how we care for our relatives and our friends and indeed how we get cared for ourselves when we become old and frail. So nailing that is critically important. How you go about it, of course, you need to have a conversation about. Boris Johnson stood on the steps of Number 10 and said he had a plan for social care. That didn't really work out. Theresa May, Benedict mentioned Theresa May, her planned reforms ahead of that snap election in 2017, I think it was. She backtracked on those and then lost her majority as well. And Andy Burnham now says that this is going to be one of his priorities. I noticed on X actually a few hours ago that he was prepared to collaborate in some way or work together constructively with Ed Davey, because Ed Davey chirped up. He's the leader, of course, to American viewers, of the Liberal Democrats, the third biggest party in this country. So getting it right is crucial, but partly, just very quickly, partly because it has a knock-on effect on the NHS. If you sort out social care, then you free up beds in our hospitals, and that is just a win-win. But you're right, Will, how we pay for it needs a lot of thinking, and it's going to be one of the thorny issues that Burnham's going to have to grapple with.
Hillary, in one respect, we have an ageing population like every other Western country. The pension system is getting more and more expensive. I have some doubts as to whether or not the triple lock is sustainable and that will be around in 10 years' time if you look at the modelling of how much it will cost. At the same time, I'm instinctively against yet another levy or yet another tax. So how do we square this circle?
Oh, well, if anybody knew, I think they would have done it yesterday, Will. I will say, I mean, look at even John Healey when he resigned and said we have money for benefits but not for bullets. Also, yes, there's the benefit system and then there's the protection. There's no point in having benefits if people are going to be threatened and the nation is at war. So I think a few things here. I think the first thing absolutely to do is we would never, when the Nazis were invading, have not only just let them come into the UK, we wouldn't have given the Nazis free 4-star hotels, free food and video games and money and to spend, etc. So I don't see why we're giving all these migrants, and they're claiming asylum. They're not coming from dangerous countries. They just want a better way of living, and they're coming to the UK for the benefits because of the pull factors. And what's the 100% proof? This isn't my opinion. This isn't political. Look at all the safe countries they come through Europe to go through before they come to the UK for those pull factors. So the first thing I would do would be eliminate those. Then you save a lot of money.
We do have to go there on that, but I think that is a savings area which is very worthwhile to pursue further, obviously. We do have more coming up in the next hour, ladies and gentlemen, including this.
This is a plane that the United States of America should have. Our Air Force One was 35, 36 years old, and it would be parked next to the new ones like this. And
today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a change on the cards today. We've got some spells of rain in the forecast. Not feeling quite as warm as it did yesterday, especially across the south. But it's going to be a very cloudy picture to start the day. Some spells of rain, also some showers, especially across parts of the south and southeast where it has been very dry this summer so far. But actually a lot of the showers across the south will die away by this afternoon, allowing a return of the sunshine here. But the showers are set to continue across much of the north. Temperatures a touch down compared to yesterday as well. Highs around 25 degrees Celsius, but for many northern areas, highs between 17 to 19 degrees. To finish off the day, there'll still be some showery spells of rain, particularly across central and southern Scotland, but eventually starting to clear from the north, so some clearer skies, perhaps some late evening sunshine to finish off the day here. Still rather cloudy across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, the odd shower or two, and the odd one could be heavy. And a very similar story across Wales and parts of central England, but actually across much of the south to end the day, some sunny spells and still remaining mostly dry here. Overnight, we'll still continue to see some spells of rain drifting their way southwards. We'll see a mix of cloud and also some clearer skies. Quite a few clear skies across Scotland, so it's soon going to be turning a bit chillier here, especially across rural spots. We could reach around the mid-single figures, but actually most towns and cities still holding up between 10 to 15 degrees across parts of the south, but a little bit fresher than what we had this morning. Then into Monday, a bit of a mixed bag once more. Still some clouds, some showers feeding in from the west, the best of the brightness across the far east. And once again, the south is going to see another dry day with some sunny spells, perhaps some further spells of rain just pushing into Northern Ireland towards the end of the day. Temperatures starting to creep back up once again, pushing into the high 20s across southeast England and even across Northern Ireland and eastern parts of Scotland. A warmer day to come.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Cates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories. And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From court mornings
to warm family brunches.
From football to tennis in the car.
In the kitchen.
GB News Breakfast is there. With the stories you need and the conversations that matter.
Anyway, let's talk business.
Well, it has been a historic night in British politics.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
We're here again to start your day just right.
GB News Breakfast.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Some people enjoy lazy Sunday mornings, but not me.
What's the truth of the matter?
So that's a very live question. Would you support him if he waters down these plans?
Before the spin sets in, I'll be getting to the truth.
This is personal.
No soft questions, no easy answers.
It's one thing if the state has rules in this country. It's another thing whether the police and others actually police them.
Setting the agenda and holding those in power to account.
You can't really blame her if the system is set up this way. You will not want to miss it, trust me.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sundays from 9:30, only on GB News.
Live from London, this is GB News with the stories shaping Britain and America. Well, the big breaking news tonight, several people have been injured and one person has reportedly died after a car was driven into a crowd at a Pride event in Berlin. There is a major development on this that has come out in the last few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to bring that to you at the top of this hour. Elsewhere, and also breaking tonight, winning back Washington, Wes Streeting will make a fresh charm offensive towards Donald Trump, but will it work?
Don't pay any attention whatsoever to what Donald Trump says.
Well, they say every joke has a kernel of truth, and the president did joke about running for an unprecedented third term in his vicious White House speech. But could it actually be a reality?
Just like my presidency, the second time is always better. It's always better. And the third time will be better yet.
And in it together, Britain and America are reportedly planning to convene a high-level meeting in London on the Strait of Hormuz.
We are not counting on Europe, but they need the Strait of Hormuz much more than we do.
And Air Force fighting. A credible Iranian threat forced Donald Trump to switch Air Force One after the NATO summit.
This is a plane that the United States of America should have. Our Air Force One was 35, 36 years old, and it would be parked next to the new ones like this, and it really didn't look appropriate for our country.
And more breaking news, Andy Burnham is reportedly planning to hand mayors a share of income tax revenue to spend on their cities in yet more sweeping devolution plans. I'm Will Kingston, and this is The Late Show Live. Welcome back to The Late Show Live for a third and final hour. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for staying with us. In London, we still have political commentators Benedict Spence and Matthew Stadlam, and in Washington, D.C., Chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson, and political commentator Hilary Fordwich. Thank you once again for joining me, team. Well, let's begin with that breaking news out of Berlin. We can now confirm that a suspected perpetrator of the apparent car attack on Pride celebrations in Berlin on Saturday night has been identified as a member of the city's Islamist scene. Shocker. And I quote that, but he has not yet been arrested, a spokesman for Berlin police said on Sunday. A spokesperson told reporters, "We have now identified a suspected perpetrator. Measures against this suspected perpetrator, who has not yet been arrested, are underway. However, this suspected perpetrator is known to the police as a member of the Islamist scene here in Berlin." Well, let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Benedict, I'll start with you. What I think is, before we get on to the implications of this Islamist terrorist act, alleged Islamist terrorist act, what I find striking about these comments from the police is the speed at which they have released that information. And I dare say that is far quicker than what we have heard from British police forces in comparable incidents in recent times.
I mean, that's possible, but I think it's also partly because German police are more used to this sort of attack than perhaps lots of British police forces are. I also suspect that this sort of information has been released. As you say, this person has not been apprehended as far as we know, and it will be, at least in part, I suspect, as part of attempts to identify, without going too far without overstepping the boundaries, but to make the public aware of who it may be, in case anybody has any sort of information. It'll be in that sort of preliminary stages where you may see information come out. If this person is not detained quickly, that may become necessary to prevent them from becoming a danger to other members of the public going forward.
Hilary, and I am conscious that there may be a language barrier here, but what a sad and tragic indictment on modern Germany that there is indeed an Islamist scene in Berlin.
Well, when you say language difficulty here, I mean, who knows? We can't say already without any concrete proof the motive, but this is not surprising at all, because in our previous hours, we were talking about previous attacks that have taken places in Berlin at Christmas markets, across Europe in terms of Christmas markets, and we've seen the culture of the Western Europe taken over by Islamists in terms of these terror threats. To me, this is not surprising at all. There was speculation earlier on in the evening, and now this is confirmed. What I think is the most sad is that a society that has for years and for centuries been able to celebrate its own religion is now under threat and events are being cancelled. That is a shame.
Greg?
Yeah, I didn't want to speculate earlier, trying to, just leave some sense of it could have been anybody, but no surprise here, no shock, and I think there's a much bigger picture here. I mean, I think these governments, especially because the people are making mass migration one of their top 2 issues pretty consistently in Western Europe. When are the governments actually going to remedy this or deal with it? And so this is just another tragic example of 10 or 15 years of completely self-destructive behavior from the governments.
Yeah, Matthew, what do you make of the most recent developments that the police have come out and said, again, perhaps somewhat surprisingly from my perspective in the United Kingdom, that they have identified him as being part of the, and I quote, Islamist scene in Berlin?
No, they've got to release that information if they think that information is going to be material to getting this person caught. I mean, it's absolutely vital that they release all relevant information as far as apprehending someone who's committed such an atrocity as that. I actually think in recent times British police have been pretty quick. English police and British police have been pretty quick to get out information, and that's very important, as I say, if it's going to help apprehend a suspect and prevent further harm. I disagree very strongly with some of the stuff that Hillary's been saying over the course of the last hour or so, talking about people coming across on boats, almost comparing them to Nazis. I mean, for goodness sake. And our culture has not been overtaken by these threats. Yes, unfortunately, we have had to take some precautions, as we do, for example, on airlines, which are very inconvenient. Have had to take some precautions because there are Islamo-fascist nutters out there, and we've been living with that threat for a very considerable amount of time. But I go about my life on a daily basis in London, in a great city, with very, very little concern for terrorism, knowing, of course, that there is a highly unlikely, but nonetheless a possibility that I could become a victim of that, but I don't allow it to dominate my life. And Hillary, you sound to me as though you live a life of fear. It's not a life that I want to live.
Hillary, right of reply.
I don't live a life of fear because I live in a place where we don't have all of these migrants coming, and that we're not housing them in my locale, and they're not going to be. I don't live somewhere, sadly, like anymore, because I love England, but somewhere like close to Oxford, where you have this, is it Piddleton, where they're having all these migrants being housed, these men, and they're going to be able to roam freely. I wouldn't want my daughter to have had anything happen to her like in Southport. So no, luckily I don't live my life in fear. Actually, my daughter lives in London.
Stop both of you. I'm hosting. I want to keep this focused at the moment on what is actually going on in Berlin. One person has died that we know of. That number may increase. We know that there's been at least 15 people have been injured, probably more now. I think it is worth keeping the conversation grounded in actually what is happening in Berlin. The broader implications, in particular when it comes to the UK, we can get to. In terms of the implications specifically in Germany, Matthew, you disagreed, I think, with the language there that Hillary used in terms of being overtaken, for example. But you must concede, given that now that this is part of a trend of Islamist attacks over the last 10 years, going back to 2016 and earlier, but 2016 being the most high-profile case of the Christmas market in Berlin, that this is a growing Islamist extremist terrorism in Germany is a growing threat.
Well, you started the show talking, before we even knew that this was an Islamist who is suspected of this crime. You started the show talking about a book that Douglas Murray wrote 10 years ago. So, of course, I'm going to respond to some of the commentary, both from you and from Hillary, that I'm hearing. That's what I'm here for. Of course, I would far prefer to talk about this horrific incident in isolation, but I don't think we can totally hive it off because, as you say, there have been other incidents before, and we know, as I keep saying, that we have lived with a terrorist threat from Islamofascism in this country, and indeed other countries have experienced it for years. The idea, by the way, that Hillary somehow finds America safer than Britain is just one of the most ludicrous things I've heard.
That's a separate conversation.
Well, she introduced it. I just want to respond to it.
I know you're bringing guns and all that sort of stuff, and it's a valid point, but it's a separate conversation at the moment. Benedict, as we look at what... Greg, I'll go to you before I go back to Benedict. part of this conversation isn't just that, well, we've been living with the threat of Islamist terrorism. It is that that threat is exacerbated by the immigration policies of Germany. We are all aware of the decisions of Angela Merkel when it came to millions of Syrians that entered Germany, many of whom have gone on to commit terrorist attacks. I should say, for clarity of language, some of whom have gone on to commit terrorist attacks. Really, the Islamist threat and immigration policy are intrinsically linked, aren't they?
Yeah, without a doubt. And Douglas Murray, again, not 10 years ago, but he's pointed that out quite recently, in that if you look at the numbers, why would you keep admitting people from the countries that have come in the past that are committing these crimes? It's not just terrorism, it's just even street crime. And so, you know, we can count. There's countless examples of this, going back to the rape gangs or whatever. But look, this is something that it's just common sense. You know, why would you continue to admit people from those countries if they're the ones committing these terrorist acts?
Yeah, so as I'm trying to pick up what we can from what is a quickly evolving story. The Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has vowed to punish those responsible, unsurprisingly. He has outlined the facts of what we know, which is that a vehicle entered Tiergarten Park and hit several people before 10 p.m. We now know, again, the latest stats that I saw was at least one dead and at least 15 who have been critically, or I should say now 16 critically injured. I suspect, sadly, just knowing the history of these types of accidents, that may very well rise further. You're currently looking at what I believe is latest footage, not live footage, latest footage of the emergency services response. That is correct. That is latest footage, not live footage, of the emergency services response in Berlin. For people who may not be up to date with this story, this was at a Pride event. We now know that the suspect has been identified, and if that suspect did indeed commit this, it is someone who was part of the, to quote the spokesperson for authorities in Berlin, part of the Islamist scene. We know that obviously Islamists take a dim view of gay and trans rights, which would go some way to explaining why this event was targeted. Benedict, well, generally, from what you've just heard in the last 5 minutes, what are your further reflections?
I mean, it's, you know, this conversation has sort of shifted slightly towards one of migration now that the question of Islamism has come to the forefront. And I just think on that topic, because it's very easy to get sort of caught up in broader arguments about it, I think we should stick perhaps to specifics in terms of the threat posed by mass migration to people in this country. I'd focus on three things in particular. One is that we know that terrorist organizations in the past have said that they would seek, where possible, to use migratory flows of refugees and other economic migrants to try to infiltrate countries in the West. The Islamic State in particular talked about doing this as a tactic quite a lot. We also know, secondarily, that state actors do this as well. The IRGC in particular has also done this in the past. This is a threat that has been raised across Western Europe. And the thing with all of this is you have to sort of take a step back and understand that if you decide to pursue a policy such as open borders on the one hand, or having very generous programs towards refugees on the other hand, there will always be nefarious people who will try to exploit that for security purposes. And we all know, of course, that the final one here is that Islamist organizations that are not necessarily what you might call terrorists in the truest sense, like the Islamic State, but organizations, political organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood, that never necessarily intended to come to Western countries, but that were persecuted in the countries that they originated in. Countries like Egypt, for instance. Many people who have fled those countries, Iran, another example, to the West seeking political asylum, have brought with them an ideology that they didn't really want to bring to this country, but they were fleeing their own countries, that they have subsequently then imported and started to spread. It's much more about seeking regime change in their home countries, but it does have an effect. So you've got three different sources there by which you can find extremism that exploits things like mass migration and leads to incidents such as this.
We do not have a policy in this country. It is so important to make this point again and again of open borders. The former... Let me make the point. You've spoken for a long time.
But this is Germany. This is Germany.
I know, but we've spread it because people keep on this... Pundits on this show keep talking about Europe. The Conservative governments, prior to this Labour government, wanted to stop the boats. That was their policy, if we're talking about boats. And this government wants to stop the boats. The question that we're all wrestling with and have different views on is what on earth you do once people get into this country. That problem would be stopped dead if the French actually said, we will take everyone back who comes across the channel.
So,
it is not the policy of this government.
Both of you stop.
We're talking about Germany.
Both of you stop, because we are, if we leave this, and we'll see how this evolves in the next few minutes, but we do have coming up, we're going to cover 900 on illegal migrants in the first week of Andy Burnham's Prime Ministership. So we do have on the agenda to talk about, and that will specifically be the UK focus. Matthew, I agree that there is, again, considerable overlap in some respects in terms of some of the themes when it comes to mass migration, multiculturalism and Islamism across the UK and Europe. At the moment, let's just stick with what we are seeing on the screen. What we do know, 3 people are still fighting for their life, so a total of 17 have now been injured. This is according to a fire brigade spokesperson. Of those, 8 have serious injuries, 3 remain in a life-threatening condition. Now, the most recent news that we have is that, and this is the line I keep coming back to. I'll give you the full context, the full line, and I will repeat it. I think it is worth repeating. We have now identified a suspected perpetrator. Measures against this suspected perpetrator, who has not yet been arrested, are underway. However, this suspected perpetrator is known to the police as a member of the Islamist scene here in Berlin. Now, Benedict, I'll go back to you here. It is that term, Islamist scene, that I find such an unusual and strange thing to say, because it seems to suggest that it is just somehow part of the fabric of the society now. It's just a part of the way things are. It's something which is just accepted. It is there. You know, it's just part of the scene. Am I reading too much into the language here, or is that an unusual phrase?
Well, I think it's increasingly becoming a very normal phrase, because again, I go back to what I was saying, which was that a lot of people who have fled Middle Eastern countries and North African countries because of political persecution, and let's be clear, governments across that region do take a very dim view of a lot of these people and do subject them to the sort of standards that we would not consider acceptable in the West. A lot of those people have come to Western countries, and you know, they don't simply give up and decide, oh, I'm actually going to become a liberal, and you know, now that I live in Germany or something like that. They do hold these views. They pass them on to other members of their diaspora community because they are seeking a broader political objective going forward. I think it would be helpful, and this is part of the problem, I suppose. It's why it's interesting that Matthew sort of refers to it as Islamofascism rather than Islamism.
Call it either. I don't mind.
Well, no, but this is my point. I think for far too long, people have actually been not prepared to scrutinise or criticise Islamism for what it is, because it sounds too similar to the religion itself, and those two things are not, in fact, the same thing. But ultimately, the ideology is very, very extreme in many circumstances. There are obviously different wings within it, but there is a great deal of there are a great deal of problems that have been caused by this ideology across the Middle East and North Africa. That's why it's persecuted to such an extent. And I do think it is about time, if we accept that there are large Islamist communities in Western countries, that we start to treat it in a similar vein as we would to other extremist political identities.
I suppose I distinguish between Islamism and Islamofascism, actually, because Islamofascism or Islamoterrorism I would see as a violent instantiation or the extreme end of Islamism. I'm no fan of Islamism, but not all Islamists go and kill people. So I think
are you referring to Islam or Islamism?
No, Islamism. Of course, I'm not referring to Islam. Islam can be interpreted as it is by the vast majority of people, Muslims in this country, in a perfectly benign and non-threatening way.
All right. I want to go back to DC. Greg, there is a very famous joke that was made by the now late, great American comedian Norm Macdonald. Canadian comedian Norm Macdonald. Apologies to American and Canadian viewers and listeners there. I'm not by any means suggesting America and Canada are the same. And the quote, or the joke I should say, is, "What terrifies me is if ISIS were to detonate a nuclear device and kill 50 million Americans, Imagine the backlash against peaceful Muslims. That joke's been repeated many times in the last 10 years as a way to describe how many people, particularly on the left, deal with tragedies like this, in that their instinctive response will not be to the casualties of Islamist terrorism. It won't be the people who are fighting for their lives. The instinctive response from many is, well, what will happen to the Islamic community? What will happen to the? What will happen? I'm speaking. What will happen to the peaceful Islamic community? Greg, my question to you would be: how do we have this conversation now, in the response to this, knowing that again, Islamist extremism is a growing threat in Europe and it needs to be dealt with, and at the same time, yes, there are many, many Muslims who are peaceful people and peace-loving people. How do you have this conversation in the right way?
Yeah, two things can be right at the same time. And look, it's really important that the criticism of mass migration or open borders or criticism of Islamists it doesn't mean you're Islamophobic, and that's really that's the natural reaction here in the U.S. from the left wing or the legacy media. It's always that, So you can't criticize, you can't tell the truth, you can't say, it's only been a few months since Henry Nowak. Where if you make that criticism, all of a sudden you're Islamophobic or you're racist. And it was the same thing with the open border here in the U.S. If you criticized mass open migration, you were somehow, a racist. It's just obscene.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, I'm just trying to keep up to date with what we know and how this is evolving. Yeah, so the German outlet Bild is also reporting that they believe that this suspect is an Islamist. Again, I should note that this the manhunt is still underway, so we don't know the details of exactly how the police have identified this suspect, given that they do not, by the sounds of things, have this man in custody yet. But again, I should make clear that they do have someone, obviously, they have identified as the suspect. They have identified him as an Islamist, or the precise language used was part of the Islamist scene. Before we move on, Hilary, your final thoughts on this at this particular point in time.
My thoughts in terms of particularly safety for both the UK but also all of Europe. Just one thing, and this is factual, this is not any opinion. This was actually in The Guardian earlier this year, back in April, reported that in the UK we're giving 40% more, to the tune of 660 million, to the French to stop the migrants, and yet they're not. So in the business world, if somebody doesn't perform, you don't pay them. So why don't we pay per migrant that they stop versus just giving them money for them to fail at doing what they're purported to do, number one. Number two, stop the pull factors. Those countries in Europe that don't have pull factors, like Poland, they don't have these issues. Sweden has actually cut back on their pull factors. If when these migrants, let's just say they are asylum seekers, but if they got to the UK shores and they weren't given free housing, free food and free the hotels, the four-star hotels, if they weren't given any of that, we stop the pull factors, you could stop it tomorrow and create safety, Will.
Yeah, well, at the moment we don't know where this particular suspect comes from initially. All we do know is that he was part of the Islamist scene in Berlin. We will keep you across this story and bring you any further developments as they come to light over the course of the next 40 minutes. And then, of course, into the breakfast show on GBNews 6 a.m. tomorrow, or I should say this morning. In other news, ladies and gentlemen, moving away from Europe, Donald Trump was forced to abandon the new presidential plane Air Force One earlier this month due to a credible security threat from Iran. Trump was set to fly home from the NATO summit in Turkey on his newly commissioned Boeing 747-8 jet, which had been donated by Qatar. But the US Secret Service, I should say, received information suggesting that Iranian proxies were planning to target the aircraft, leading to a last-minute switch to his old plane. Exact details of the threat have not been disclosed, but Iranian leaders have repeatedly called for Trump's assassination in the past. The president changed back to the old version of Air Force One during a stopover at RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk once the threat had been neutralised. With me now is senior Iran analyst at Dawn, Omid Memarian. Omid, good to see you once again. Tell me a bit more about this situation.
Thanks for having me on, Will. So the core of the issue is that the Secret Service received credible threat warnings that Iranian proxies are going to, to attack President Trump's Air Force One. So because of that, in the last hours from leaving Ankara to the U.S., they had to change the plane. So the U.S. President traveled with the new Air Force One, or the plane that they received as a gift from the Qataris, but they had to move to the Air Force One. And I think the reason is that, first of all, it was very close to Iran, traveling to Ankara, and also the threat was credible. And third, I think the new plane did not have the the defense mechanisms or the anti-missile equipments that the Air Force One usually has. So I think that was a very smart decision by the Secret Service, but also it raises the question as why they used this airplane that was not ready to, to take the president to Turkey in the first place.
Well, there's a question that's crossed my mind as well, is that do you think it's appropriate for the most important plane in the United States, which hasn't been built in the United States? I'm sure it's been retrofitted. I'm sure that the Secret Service have swept it about as thoroughly as you possibly could. Nonetheless, that a plane that's been donated by a foreign country, do you think that really should be the plane that transports the President of the United States?
I think that's beneath prestige of the U.S. president to receive such gifts from foreign governments, and I think it creates a lot of questions about why these governments try to influence U.S. politics. In general, I think it was not a smart move, and it has raised a lot of questions in the U.S. The plane itself is not something that the president can use, and they have to spend tens of millions of dollars to make it ready for the president to travel with. Until the new Air Force One is ready by Boeing, the company, and he can use the new one, because the current Air Force One is very old, and many people have said, many experts said it's been used more than it should have been used since the 1991.
Great to chat to you as always. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Still ahead on The Late Show Live, Andy Burnham is reportedly planning to hand mayors a share of income tax revenue to spend on their cities in sweeping devolution plans. This is The Late Show Live, only on the People's Channel, GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a change on the cards today. We've got some spells of rain in the forecast, not feeling quite as warm as it did yesterday, especially across the south. But it's going to be a very cloudy picture to start the day. Some spells of rain, also some showers, especially across parts of the south and southeast where it has been very dry this summer so far. But actually a lot of the showers across the south will die away by this afternoon, allowing a return of the sunshine here. But the showers are set to continue across much of the north. Temperatures a touch down compared to yesterday as well, highs of around 25 degrees Celsius, but for many northern areas, highs between 17 to 19 degrees. To finish off the day, there'll still be some showery spells of rain, particularly across central and southern Scotland, but eventually starting to clear from the north, so some clearer skies, perhaps some late evening sunshine to finish off the day here. Still rather cloudy across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, the odd shower or two, and the odd one could be heavy. And a very similar story across Wales and parts of central England, but actually across much of the south to end the day, some sunny spells and still remaining mostly dry here. Overnight, we'll still continue to see some spells of rain drifting their way southwards. We'll see a mix of cloud and also some clearer skies. Quite a few clear skies across Scotland, so it's soon going to be turning a bit chillier here, especially across rural spots. We could reach around the mid-single figures, but actually most towns and cities still holding up between 10 to 15 degrees across parts of the south, but a little bit fresher than what we had this morning. Then into Monday, a bit of a mixed bag once more. Still some clouds, some showers feeding in from the west. The best of the brightness across the far east. And once again, the south is going to see another dry day with some sunny spells. Perhaps some further spells of rain just pushing into Northern Ireland towards the end of the day. Temperatures starting to creep back up once again, pushing into the high 20s across southeast England and even across Northern Ireland and eastern parts of Scotland. A warmer day to come.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories. And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Let's remind you of that breaking news we brought to you at the top of the show. A suspected perpetrator of the apparent car attack on Pride celebrations in Berlin on Saturday night has been identified as a member of the city's, and I quote, Islamist scene, but he has not yet been arrested, a spokesman for Berlin police said on Sunday. A spokesperson told reporters, "We have now identified a suspected perpetrator. Measures against this suspected perpetrator, who has not yet been arrested, are underway. However, this suspected perpetrator is known to the police as a member of the Islamist scene here in Berlin." We will bring you more updates. A couple of things which I'm just getting out of Reuters, which we haven't mentioned to date, is that the vehicle drove into Tiergarten around 10 p.m, injuring people in the process. It came to a standstill only after hitting a tree in Tiergarten, and then the van was empty, which has been suggested was a white van or minibus, was empty when bystanders approached it, which suggests that the perpetrator did flee on foot. But again, as we understand it, he has yet to be arrested despite a suspect being identified. We will keep you up to date with that over the next half an hour, and then of course we will be following the story on the breakfast show from 6 a.m. on GB News. In other news, we've had a flurry of new policy announcements since Andy Burnham became Prime Minister on Monday, but precious little so far on immigration. And GB News can reveal that in the 5 days since Burnham took office, nearly 900 more migrants have arrived on small boats. 881 have made the illegal journey across the Channel this week alone, bringing the total for 2026 so far to over 13,500. The criminal gangs, which Keir Starmer promised to smash, are using new tactics to smuggle migrants into the country, including launching further along the French coast and also using much larger boats. 165 arrived on a single mega dinghy on Tuesday, bringing the record for the number of migrants crammed into one vessel, breaking the number I should say, for the record. So what an unfortunate record that is. New polling this week showed that 3 in 5 Brits don't think Burnham will be able to stop the boats. With me now is the Director for the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates. Rob, good to see you. I'll pose that same question that was posed in that poll to the British public. Do you think Burnham will be able to stop the boats?
No, and I don't, for several reasons. First of all, the reappointment of Shabana Mahmood, I think, is actually rather worrying. I think the plans that she had put in place, especially the one in, one out deal with France, and actually the huge payments that we are making to them, are now coming a crop, and we are seeing the people smugglers adapt and change their tactics. And actually, any sort of temporary lull that we did see in numbers was the result of short-term operational wins that we now seem to be seeing disappear. On the second front, I don't think it's really something that Burnham has as part of his philosophy. I think he's made the conscious decision for migration to be as far away from what he talks about as possible. And actually, when he was in Manchester, he did make some statements that were incredibly concerning, would actually make the crisis worse. For instance, he wants Channel migrants to have the right to work before their asylum application has even been processed. He also thinks that newcomers should have the right to access the welfare state and social housing. These are huge pull factors. And it is very concerning now that this crisis is rearing its head again. The new Prime Minister, has said nothing on it so far.
Do you think, and again, at least for the last week, that lack of substantial communication on this subject from Burnham has been replaced by feel-good social media clips, by a few giveaways, by the, I think, largely symbolic and largely diversionary conversation around devolution and Number 10 North. How long can he continue with that sort of diversionary approach when boats continue to reach the United Kingdom?
I think it will be increasingly difficult for him, but I don't doubt that he will continue to try this approach that he is adopting. Of course, he's very clearly now sort of getting everything in line for a general election, and he wants everything to be as popular as possible. So having the border failure at the forefront of voters' minds doesn't help with that in any way, shape, or form. Because even if another boat never crossed the English Channel, we are still in the midst of a crisis. Over 200,000 have already arrived since this crisis first began. Very, very few of them have ever been deported. They continue to be put in HMOs and in the hearts of communities and being given asylum status. And increasingly, actually, we are seeing problems with the appeals backlog, which the government doesn't seem to be able to grip either as well. So there is huge problems across the board here, and I don't know how much longer we can run from them.
Rob, in brief, how do you stop the boats?
Detention and deportation, and to say heck with the human rights framework because it's not working for Britain's national interest.
Well, that's certainly very punchy, and I agree with you. Rob Bates, thank you very much. Let's go to the panel. Matthew, I will start with you. You mentioned, for example, better cooperation with the French and the French doing their job. But at the same time, I agree with what we just heard from Rob. Why don't you just approach it very simply by saying, and this is what Australia did, if you make a strong statement to say to illegal migrants that if you come to this country by boat, you will never, ever be allowed to stay. And B, if you do make it onto the shore, you will be detained and you will stay in detention until you choose to go back to your country of origin or a third-party country if that particular arrangement is agreed. Surely that would stop the boats in weeks, as it did in Australia.
We were talking earlier about the difficulty in building prisons, and one of the reasons I suspect it's difficult to build prisons is because people don't tend to want prisons in their backyard. People don't really want detention centres in their backyard. This is not an easy problem. Rishi Sunak knew it was an important issue. Keir Starmer knew it was an important issue. Neither of them were able to stop the boats. It is true, according to the Home Office, that they have stopped 45,000 attempted crossings since the general election. And actually, I think the reason you're seeing, for example, this boat stuffed full of 120, 160 human beings is because the gangs, these wicked gangs, are adapting because of French policing improvements or tackling it more seriously on the beaches of France. What I don't quite understand is why the French don't just say, if the French are serious about stopping this, and they seem to be putting some resources to it, as I say, 45,000 attempted crossings stopped, why don't they just say, well, we will take everybody back who crosses the channel, and that would sort out issues like camps in Calais and so forth, would it not?
Well,
I can't understand why they won't do that.
It's not in their interest to keep them. Like, they will be more than happy, I imagine, for the UK to take these illegal migrants because it means that they no longer are France's problem.
Except what you're seeing, because of these cross-channel crossings, you're seeing parts of northern France in a real mess. Look, Macron gave Starmer this great award, didn't he, their highest honour, just before he left office, and yet he was unable to deliver for Starmer on something that undoubtedly is important. The reason why we haven't managed to stop the boats ultimately is because we are trying to stop them, that is the government's policy, at the same time as holding on to our values, and also because you can't deport people if you don't know where they come from. And we're constantly told, aren't we, that people are throwing their documents overboard. If you don't know where they come from, you can't deport them. None of this is easy.
It's not easy, but again, it has been solved in Australia, it has been solved in the United States, and it's been solved in a much shorter period of time than the 2 years of Labor government. Benedict, I accept that at the moment, particularly under the existing legal framework, that creates difficulties with detention and deportation, but surely that's an argument for changing that framework in order to be able to achieve the policy objectives, as opposed to just saying, well, you know what, this is really tough.
I do suspect that at some point in the next couple of years that will be the solution. It probably won't happen under this government. It'll probably be after a general election, and whether or not you actually see a Reform government or a Conservative government or some sort of weird coalition between the two. I don't know what on earth a future government in the United Kingdom is going to look like, because it's a real mess at the moment. But it's not going to happen on this government's watch, but at some point I do believe that it will happen. But I do think that there's something else that needs to be said about all of this, because we're talking specifically now about how it is you deal with the asylum seekers themselves, but they are being facilitated by criminal organisations. Now, that's not to sort of absolve them of any blame, but I think that it's an important part of the puzzle to discuss. And these are criminal organisations that do not simply smuggle people. They smuggle all sorts of other things as well, and they operate across the continent. And what I would like to know, ultimately, is where actually is the conjoined attempt, not just by the UK and France, because these gangs operate out of Italy and the Balkans and Turkey and Greece as well. If there was any kind of idea about European solidarity when it came to stopping any of this problem, there would be more of a concerted effort to stop these gangs that are also involved in the smuggling of drugs, weapons, and many other illegal items as well. It is in everybody's interest to smash these gangs, to stop people trafficking, because you'll deal with a lot of other things as well. And other countries across Europe are not dealing with it.
And on that last point, in terms of the second-order effects of smashing the gangs, I agree with you. But at the same time, smashing the gangs is just dealing with the symptom, not the root cause. Ultimately, they are businesses, illegal businesses, that are responding to a consumer demand. And the consumer demand is from illegal migrants who see the benefits of coming to the United Kingdom, as opposed to going to France.
Well, lots go to France, loads go to France.
As opposed, well, all the ones that are going to the United Kingdom are going to the United Kingdom. Yeah. As opposed to all of the other safe countries that they do travel through. Many of them, again, 13,500 this year, have chosen specifically to come here. The illegal gangs are just responding to that demand. So ultimately, if you want to solve the root cause, you solve with making that or making sure that there is no longer that consumer demand.
That's certainly a large part of the issue, yes, but we also have to remember that a lot of the people that come into this country illegally, in order to pay off the debts to those gangs, then ultimately end up working for those gangs. This is one of the major issues that we had about taking migrants out of, say, centralised accommodation, be that hotels or whatever else it is, and sticking them across the country in other various housing setups, because then you had less of an idea who it was that they were talking to, what it is that they were doing, where it is that they were going. So ultimately, it's not simply just, I take the point, it is also about the demand for people being taken from A to B, but not a lot of those people necessarily come into the UK and are then told, oh, well, off you go, you're free to your own devices. A lot of them do end up working with the very same criminal organisations that bring them here in the first place, and if you take away other sources of revenue as well, you actually reduce the opportunities and therefore the interest in those gang smuggling those people in the first place. They're not going to bring people from A to B who can't pay them in the first place. If you also take away their possibilities of earning in the UK when they get here, that's a much reduced incentive.
So, Greg, there is an analogous situation, or was, I guess, an analogous situation with the cartels in Mexico and basically bringing people over to the United States, where a lot of the time they would effectively be slaves to the cartels, paying off that cost. Explain to me that situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the solutions that we executed here in the U.S. was going after the cartels, and that's important. So, and I'm with Benjamin on this, you have to go after the cartels and put them in jail or do whatever you have to do with them, or worse. But you also have to have the incentive to actually fix the problem. And during the Biden years, nothing really changed except that President Trump decided to stop the insanity at the border, whereas Biden basically turned the management of our southern border over to the sex and human trafficking cartels. And so that's what was really criminal about it, is they didn't want to stop it. They did it on purpose. And then they redistributed the illegal migrants around the country, mostly for demographic reasons, for the next census in 2030 so they can win more elections. But I'm always curious, back to the UK, do they really want to stop the boats? Do they really want to stop this? Probably not, because they want a bigger welfare state. They want a bigger government. They want a bigger state. What a great way to do it.
Absolutely, they know these politicians. I'm sorry, Greg, you don't spend enough time in this country if you don't understand that Labour Prime Ministers and Tory Prime Ministers before them know that this is a toxic issue. They want to stop it. It is just very difficult to stop it because guess what? We have laws in this country and we have obligations. This is not an issue specific to Britain. You can change the laws and you can change your values. But guess what? A lot of people still think that we are a civilised country and that people who are genuinely in need, we don't want to just hand them back to the Taliban.
And this is the key point. And Matthew, to your point, I agree with you. I think that some, not all, some in the Labor Party do want to fix this problem. Sure. But to your point around values, they don't want to fix it badly enough. They don't want to fix it more than being seen to be compromising their values. They don't want to fix it more than seeing what would be bad optics around having children in detention centres. They don't want to fix it more than giving away their precious ECHR. So I agree with you. I think they probably would like to fix it in a perfect world, but that requires them to actually give up many of the things that they prefer, like, for example, nebulous values, like, for example, international human rights frameworks. That's the problem. Hillary, you've discussed this on separate but related topics tonight. You're off the leash. Talk about whatever you want on this topic.
No, well, I said it earlier this evening, and I'll say it again. In the business world, if somebody fails, you don't pay them. In the Guardian, which is not exactly right-leaning, they reported that the expenditure was up 40%. That was reported in April to £660 million to the French to stop the migrants. Well, they failed. If you paid per head, the French might do something. That's number one. So that's kind of the push factor, them being pushed across the channel. The pull factor is just stop it tomorrow. This is very easily solved. How many of the illegals go to Poland? None. There's nothing. So they don't, and as you mentioned earlier, Will, Australia's solved it. This is very simple to solve overnight if the government really cared. Now, I will say, having grown up in England, understood, yes, civilised society, I think those people in need, the UK for centuries has also given many, many people refuge. That's lovely. Those people in the UK right now that think all these migrants are just fine, people like Matthew, they can house them in their homes. Take them in. Take them into your own home if that's what you want.
I don't want to house people in my homes. What I don't want to do, for example, is, and I'm certainly not advocating it, some people would love to shoot them, wouldn't they, in the Channel? Some people would be happy for them to drown.
That's a ridiculous straw man.
No, but that's not our values. Ultimately, we have to treat people once they... It's a paradox, because as I say, the government wants to stop the boats. They do not want these people coming here. But once they're on our land, it's different with America, where you've got a land border with Mexico. We have a dangerous channel, and we have responsibilities once people are in the sea. We cannot, and we shouldn't, let them drown. And then once they are on our land, it becomes the issue that it has been for the last 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever it is now, years. And it's a damn difficult issue, because I can guarantee this nonsense that Greg's spouting about trying to change the voting demographics, that is utter nonsense. These people aren't getting the right to vote anytime soon.
Matthew,
it is very difficult to fix. That's why it hasn't been fixed. I don't want the boats to come.
Matthew,
I do not want the boats to come. But I'm not prepared to compromise all of our values in the process of trying to stop it.
And I think that is actually a really good point to end on, because I think that is the fundamental distinction between the people in this debate. Some people want to fix it, but they don't want to fix it badly enough. Other people just want to sort this out. And if that means being, going against some sort of nebulous values that some people may agree with and some people don't, then so be it. Let's delve into some of the main stories on the front of tomorrow's papers, I should say today's now, starting with the Sunday Mirror. Prime Minister Andy Burnham writes in the Sunday Mirror saying his government are going to get Britain believing again. In a pledge to go further, the former Great Manchester Mayor claimed he was used to being told things can't be done, and that the era of governments giving up trying to solve the issues impacting people was over. Very relevant to our previous conversation. Writing for the newspaper, Mr Burnham claimed this week had shown how politicians could make lives a little bit easier, but his job won't be done until people aren't just living, but living well. He said, life doesn't always go to plan, but whether someone gets the chance to get back on their feet says something about who we are. It says something about the country we're trying to build. I want Britain to be a country where nobody is written off, where everybody is treated with respect no matter who they are or what they've been through, and where the government doesn't avoid a problem because it's difficult but rolls up its sleeves and gets to work. Benedict, noble sentiments, but what on earth does that mean?
Yeah, what I would say is right now, Burnham is coming in, he's coming in a little bit unprepared because he was expecting Keir Starmer to remain in place for most of the summer and that this would give Burnham time to get his feet under the table, so to speak. Now, Starmer's not done him a favour there. He's decided to go, which is entirely his right to do so. But what Burnham is trying to do, whilst not necessarily having all the meat to put on the bones for his vision of Britain, is he's trying to do the opposite of Keir Starmer. When Keir Starmer was elected, he came out and he said, well, chaps, it's dreadful. There's a massive black hole in the budget. It's getting bigger. Don't know where it's coming from. Prisons are overcrowded. Everything's a bit bad because of what we've inherited from the Tories. And it's going to take me about 10 years before I turn any of this around. Nobody looked upon those first few weeks in office and thought, wow, this is an optimistic, upbeat start. Least of all people within the Labour Party. Actually, there was plenty of devastation, frankly, from a lot of backbenchers going, why on earth is he framing it in this way? At the very least, Burnham, whilst he's not entirely prepared, is trying to address this in a slightly different way. He's trying to be optimistic. I don't actually think that there is very much there in his project at this moment in time to be optimistic about, but this is about messaging whilst he's trying to get things going. And I do think that there is something to be said about at least trying to be on the front foot, whether or not you actually agree with Burnham's ideology. He is the Prime Minister of this country. We should all want him to succeed. Even if we don't think he's actually going to, it's in the best interest of this country that he do so. So I can understand why he's looking at Starmer's approach, which was terrible, and going, well, the opposite can't be much worse, can it?
And he's been very clever, guys, by the way he's doing it, because having these releases, these press releases at 6 a.m. day after day, and not doing it in person, and not doing media until maybe later in the day, and I do definitely think politicians, particularly Prime Ministers, should be scrutinised, but not doing it in press conferences, standing behind a lectern, as Keir Starmer might have done, means that the headline points he wants to get out are got out, and the media talk about them, discuss them, at least for a few hours, rather than then being able immediately to ask him a question about the boats, and then the original message, the original press release, the giveaway or whatever it is swallowed up or lost in the media questions that follow. But optimism is great. Getting on the front foot is fantastic. It's a big difference, as Benedict says, from Starmer. The proof of the pudding will come in the eating when he's actually challenged with the sorts of difficult conversations that we're having now, because we know that a lot of people in this country really do care about the boats, care about stopping them, even more than I care about stopping them, as you were insinuating, and I do want them to be stopped, but how you stop them is difficult. I don't, by the way, believe that Reform have the answer. They say they have the answer. I don't believe. Burnham is going to have to grapple with these issues. At the moment, he is doing a good job in setting his agenda.
Yeah, Hillary, I think that point that Matthew made around comms strategy was an interesting one. It's one that I hadn't picked up. And again, it makes you wonder, well, how terribly Starmer did with, and the Starmer government did with their comms in comparison. But again, to Matthew's point, comms can only take you so far. Eventually, you have to deliver the meat.
Well, actually, I will agree with Matthew. Everybody put that in their calendars that I did agree with him at some juncture. But I think it's a brilliant avoidance campaign, avoiding taking any kind of scrutiny. You're right, the Prime Minister should have scrutiny. Let's just see how he does in Prime Minister's questioning time when Kemi Badenoch kind of goes at him and holds him to account. But I will say it's a great strategy, great avoidance. A press release at 6 a.m. Most people aren't up anyway, and let the day's activities and the day's news overtake everything, so he's not scrutinised. I also realise, noted that there was a realization that he wasn't going to have any scrutiny when he just was selecting the questions he would answer from Reddit during one interview and one podcast. So I think from his comms standpoint, he's definitely in control. Yes, let's see how he does in terms of actually functioning in Prime Minister's questioning times. That will be interesting. A good watch.
Greg, we've got about 45 seconds left. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think we all agree this is a problem that's not going away. So if Andy Burnham wants to kick the can down the road, just for a few days or a few weeks, I get that. He's addressed other issues, other topics this week. I don't think he's going to solve this crisis overnight. So maybe he's developing a plan. Maybe he's got something that he can act on in the next few weeks or few months. I hope so, and I think we all want this problem to be solved.
I hope so.
Well, the interesting comparison as to whether or not this ultimately will be similar to Kamala Harris, who was brought in order to basically take over from a toxic leader came in on a hope, change,
Unelected.
vibes, unelected, hope, change, vibes platform. But in the end, vibes only took her so far and she didn't have the substance to back it up. Yeah. Whether or not Burnham will have the substance, as everyone has suggested, remains to be seen. That's all we have for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to my panel, Greg and Hillary in the United States and Matthew and Benedict in London. This has been a joy as always. I'll be back tomorrow night on The Late Show live from 12 a.m. Make sure you tune in on the People's Channel, GB News.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. A bit of a change on the cards today. We've got some spells of rain in the forecast. Not feeling quite as warm as it did yesterday, especially across the south. But it's going to be a very cloudy picture to start the day. Some spells of rain, also some showers, especially across parts of the south and southeast where it has been very dry this summer so far. But actually a lot of the showers across the south will die away by this afternoon, allowing a return of the sunshine here. But the showers are set to continue across much of the north. Temperatures a touch down compared to yesterday as well. Highs of around 25 degrees Celsius, but for many northern areas, highs between 17 to 19 degrees. To finish off the day, there'll still be some showery spells of rain, particularly across central and southern Scotland, but eventually starting to clear from the north, so some clearer skies, perhaps some late evening sunshine to finish off the day here. Still rather cloudy across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, the odd shower or two, and the odd one could be heavy. And a very similar story across Wales and parts of central England, but actually across much of the south to end the day, some sunny spells and still remaining mostly dry here. Overnight, we'll still continue to see some spells of rain drifting their way southwards. We'll see a mix of cloud and also some clearer skies. Quite a few clear skies across Scotland, so it's soon going to be turning a bit chillier here, especially across rural spots. We could reach around the mid-single figures, but actually most towns and cities still holding up between 10 to 15 degrees across parts of the south, but a little bit fresher than what we had this morning. Then into Monday, a bit of a mixed bag once more. Still some clouds, some showers feeding in from the west. The best of the brightness across the far east. And once again, the south is going to see another dry day with some sunny spells. Perhaps some further spells of rain just pushing into Northern Ireland towards the end of the day. Temperatures starting to creep back up once again, pushing into the high 20s across southeast England and even across Northern Ireland and eastern parts of Scotland. A warmer day to come.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates, 5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me. Do you trust what you're being told? Good, because neither do I.
Those are just facts.
I'm Alex Armstrong, and on my show, we'll expose the spin.
Well, I want to answer that because you didn't let me last time, because you always speak over me.
The broken promises.
To deny that is denying the truth.
And the hypocrisy.
Needs to stop. You think we can allow?
Politics, policy, parliament. Nothing is off limits. No sugarcoating, no fear of offence, just the truth laid bare. Tune in every Saturday and Sunday at 9 p.m. for Alex Armstrong Tonight, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here at GB News, we made a promise to tell your stories.
And on the 6th of August, we're marking 5 years of doing exactly that.
Celebrate with us by having your say. Join in the debates live on TV and radio.
And meeting your favourite presenters across the country, from Leeds to Aberdeen, from Belfast to Barry Island.
Plus, join me in Essex for our biggest live show of the year. Scan the QR code or visit gbnews.com/celebrate. Terms and conditions apply.
Breaking news, live updates, stories that matter.
From the heart of the GB newsroom to every corner of Britain, with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
GB News bulletins are there to deliver the latest news that matters to you.
Bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain is not just a geographical expression. We are a people bound together by history and culture that are distinctively British. Join me to celebrate our music, theatre, artworks and literature, which we can explore and enjoy together.
Everybody's welcome.
Sunday with Michael Portillo. Every Sunday at 11 a.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The GB News audience is different, it's unique, because they see through the nonsense.
We want to debate with each other. We want to listen and maybe learn.
We have a chat. That's what we do. We try and have a chat.
They'll watch my programme while they're eating their tea. They'll watch breakfast while they're busy getting their kids ready for school.
We want to hear what matters to you, what is new.